Chapter 1383. Along the way, Lu Yi only observed from afar as he walked past various shops. Although the 9 prefectures had been promoted to a large realm a few years ago, and could be considered to be connected to the universe, it was still just the beginning. There were many things that needed to be familiarized with slowly. For example, the various prices in the universe. The cultivators of the 9 prefectures knew nothing about them. These things were not recorded in the human tribe's resting abyss pavilion. If Lu Yi wanted to buy or sell something here, he had to first understand the prices here. Otherwise, he would suffer a loss without knowing it. After shopping for nearly a day, Lu Yi had a general understanding of the prices here. He also saw some things that piqued his interest. For example, in a shop that specialized in selling starboats, he saw a small starboat that could be used by a single person. It was the cheapest starboat among all the starboats. However, even the cheapest starboat cost 20,000 spirit jades, while the larger ones cost 100 to 200,000 spirit jades. It was not something he could afford. He used to think that he was quite rich, because he did not have to worry about cultivation. The spiritual jades he had were enough for him to cultivate for a long time. However, when he came to the 10,000 elephant sea, he realized that he was really poor. For cultivators, no matter how many spiritual jades they had, they would never be enough. One day later, Lu Yi stood in front of the largest pagoda in the center of the 10,000 elephant island. This was the symbol of the 10,000 elephant island, and also the headquarters of the 10,000 elephant chamber of commerce. With his experience in the Spirit Stream battlefield and the Cloud River battlefield, Lu Yi naturally knew that if he really wanted to buy something, he had to come to this place. The things sold here might be more expensive than outside, but the quality was guaranteed. Of course, he did not come here to buy anything. He walked in leisurely. The interior of the 10,000 elephant chamber of commerce was luxuriously decorated and spacious. It was easy to feel reverence for this colossus. This was also a common method used by merchants to let their customers feel their powerful foundation. This way, no matter what kind of transaction they made later, it would be much smoother. Someone received Lu Yi and led him to a private room without asking much. After serving him tea, he left. Lu Yi took things as they came. He sipped the tea and waited quietly. He had experienced this scene many times in the 9 prefectures. Although the place was different and the cultivation level was different, the pattern was the same. Sure enough, a moment later, a smiling manager of the Chamber of Commerce came to inquire about Lu Yi's business. Lu Yi silently took out his Pan Shan saber and placed it in front of the person who called himself Chao Xiang. Chao Xiang smiled and apologized. He then held the Pan Shan saber with both hands and slowly pulled it out to take a closer look at it. As soon as he looked at it, he had an idea. He then asked warmly, "Dao friend, are you trying to repair this saber?" As a person who dealt with outsiders all year round, he had long developed a pair of extraordinary eyes for discerning people. Naturally, he could see through the details of Lu Yebing's cultivation. If a weapon cultivator took out his own spiritual treasure, it was definitely not for sale. Moreover, the cracks on the Pan Shan saber were obvious. He immediately saw through Lu Yi's intentions. "What price?" Lu Yi asked. Chao Xiang didn't answer immediately. Instead, he silently sensed the mountain pan saber. After a while he said, "This saber is tough and durable. Although I can't tell what ores were used to forge it, it must have been recast once. Moreover, some precious materials were added during the recasting process. It shouldn't be difficult to repair this saber. There are outstanding blacksmiths in the Chamber of Commerce who can completely repair these cracks." Lu Yi knew that Chao Xiang's asking price wouldn't be cheap, but he was still secretly speechless. However, he had to admit that Chao Xiang's eyesight was very good. Some precious materials had indeed been added to the Pan Shan saber when it was recast. They were all spoils of war that Lu Yi had obtained from the Alpha Origin stage. Lu Yi's expression didn't change as he indifferently said, "Spiritual treasures don't exceed 10,000. Ordinary spiritual treasures only cost 2 to 3,000 spirit jades. Even the better ones only cost around 5,000. I'm just trying to repair it. Isn't 2,000 too much?" With the information he had gathered the day before, Lu Yi more or less had some understanding of the price of spiritual treasures. Just as he said, spiritual treasures only cost 2,000 to 3,000 spirit jades. This was a price that constellation stage experts could afford. Chao Xiang smiled slightly. Dao friend also said that I'm just trying to repair it. To a weapon cultivator, a suitable spiritual treasure is extremely important. What's most important is that it's easy to use. Dao friend may be able to buy a spiritual treasure with 2,000 spirit jades, but how much strength can you display if you use it? This was the truth. It was likely that Lu Yi had seen through this point, which was why he dared to ask for such a high price. Lu Yi lightly tapped the table and said, "There are no restrictions in my saber. It's just a simple repair. It shouldn't be too difficult." Chao Xiang was slightly stunned. "No restrictions? You can feel it." Lu Yi raised his hand. Chao Xiang really didn't know. Although he had felt the Pan Shan saber earlier, he hadn't examined it too carefully in front of its owner Lu Yi. Now that he heard Lu Ye's words, he hurriedly examined it carefully. In the end, he discovered that there were indeed no restrictions inside the saber. It was purely tough. After working in the Wuxia Chamber of Commerce for so many years, this was the first time Chao Xiang had encountered such a situation. He couldn't help but feel strange. What was a saber without any restrictions used for? It wasn't good to ask too much. After all, this was Lu Ye's private matter. There were millions of cultivators, each with their own strange hobbies and characteristics. It wasn't something he could casually inquire about. If there are no restrictions, it'll be much easier to repair it. I'll lower the price by 200 spirit jades to 1,800. 1,000. Lu Yi looked at him with a calm expression. Chao Xiang couldn't help but laugh. Fellow Taoist, our Wuxia Chamber of Commerce has its own rules for all kinds of transactions. We can't just randomly haggle like outside. Lu Yi leisurely said. This is my first time coming to the Wuxia Chamber of Commerce. In the future, I'll surely disturb you. If it's convenient, we can exchange musical notes. If there's anything else I want to trade, I'll look for you directly. Chao Xiang hurriedly took out a musical note and handed it to Lu Yi. He beamed with joy. Thank you for your kind intentions. Lu Yi also took out his own musical note. After the exchange, Chao Xiang gritted his teeth. 1,500 fellow Taoist. This is the lowest price I can decide. If it's any lower, we can't do business. Lu Yi knew that Chao Xiang wasn't telling the truth. However, since he was doing business, he naturally had to give Chao Xiang a bit of profit. He was afraid that he couldn't lower the price. He nodded and said, "All right." Fellow Taoist is straightforward. Chao Xiang showed a grateful expression. Whether it was true or not, Chao Xiang's attitude was good. Afterwards, he took out a special weighing instrument and recorded the mountain pan saber's weight and length in front of Lu Yi. He also recorded the mountain pan saber's various characteristics with his divine sense before handing it to Lu Yi. This is the receipt. Fellow Taoists can come to the Chamber of Commerce to pick up the saber in 10 days. Just show this jade slip when the time comes. Lu Yi nodded and carefully put away the jade slip before handing over 1,500 spirit jades to Chao Xiang. It had to be said that the Wuxia Chamber of Commerce's business was quite standard and had won the trust of their customers. Chao Xiang could tell that Lu Yi had other things to trade, so he tentatively asked, "Does fellow Taoist have any other instructions? Does your Chamber of Commerce trade information?" Chao Xiang smiled and nodded. "Naturally." "What kind of information does fellow Taoist want to inquire about?" Lu Yi nodded. "I want to inquire about the location of a galaxy," Chao Xiang said. "If you want to inquire about the galaxy's location, you'll need to pay 1,000 spirit jades." Lu Yi's eyelids twitched. Asking for 1,000 spirit jades at the drop of a hat? Who knew how long the spirit jades he had would last? "Are you sure you can give me an answer?" Lu Yi asked cautiously. It would be too much of a loss if he didn't get a satisfactory answer after paying with his spirit jades. Basically, the Vientiane trading firm knows the locations of all the galaxies in this star field. Of course, there are some exceptions. After all, the starry sky is vast, and there are always some remote places that have never interacted with the Vientiane trading firm. If that's the case, then I'll only take 300 spiritual jades as a deposit. Once I've found out more about it, you can pay the rest. It made sense. When Lu Yi said the two words Yuluo, Chao Xiang even specifically asked how to write the two words Yuluo. Obviously, he was afraid that there would be an accent. Please wait for a moment, fellow Taoist, Chao Xiang said and left. He was probably going to investigate this matter. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, Chao Xiang returned with an awkward expression. Fellow Taoist, the situation is like this. I didn't find any records of the Jade Conch Galaxy. If you're not in a hurry, I'll take a look. The Chamber of Commerce can send someone to inquire about it. There should be some clues. There's no hurry. Lu Yi calmly took out 300 spiritual jades and paid the deposit. Tang Jun would sooner or later inquire about the Jade Conch Galaxy through the Vientiane trading firm. But Lu Yi wouldn't save the spiritual jades. He couldn't rely on others for this kind of thing. In the end, Lu Yi still didn't have complete trust in Tang Jun. If this old man found out about the Jade Conch Galaxy's location and ran away alone, Lu Yi wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Therefore, he would rather spend 1,000 spiritual jades than pin his hopes on others. As he got up and walked out, he suddenly thought of something. Can you find me a copy of the price of the various fire attribute materials in your Chamber of Commerce? Chao Xiang was startled for a moment before nodding. No problem. A moment later, Lu Yi walked out of the Vientiane trading firm with a jade slip. This time, his assets had shrunk by nearly 10%. Moreover, Lu Yi had a hunch that he wouldn't be able to keep the rest of the spiritual jades, because the things he was about to buy were the most important. His talent tree's fuel reserves were running low. He hadn't replenished his talent tree's fuel for a long time. Ever since he ascended to the constellation realm, every cultivation consumed the talent tree's fuel, and the consumption rate was much faster than before. This was normal. Before he ascended to the constellation realm, he mostly focused on stealing heaven's secrets and refining spirit pills. However, after ascending to the constellation realm, he needed to refine the energy in the spiritual jades. If it was just refining, it wouldn't consume much of his talent tree's fuel, because the process of absorbing and refining the spiritual jades would remove a lot of impurities. However, he often chose to consume spiritual jades and Star Beast's monster cores in order to recover faster. This method consumed a lot of his talent tree's fuel. Chapter 1384. Lu Yi almost forgot when he last replenished the talent tree's fuel. Since the talent tree stopped producing new spiritual runes, he no longer cared about it. However, it was foreseeable that as his cultivation increased, the consumption of the talent tree's fuel would increase as well, as the amount of resources he could refine would increase. In order to ensure his future cultivation, it was imperative to replenish the talent tree's fuel. Repairing the mountain pan saber and collecting information about the Jade Conch were things he had to do at the Vientiane Chamber of Commerce. But replenishing the talent tree's fuel was not necessary. He did not have a lot of spiritual jades on hand, thus he had to save them as much as he could. After exiting the Chamber of Commerce, he soared into the sky and flew in a certain direction. Half an hour later, he arrived at a spacious area near the edge of the island of versatility. The area did not have any crisscrossing streets, as if it was a separate space. The trade on the island of versatility was mainly done by the Vientiane Chamber of Commerce, which was bustling with people. Next were the shops on the streets of the island of versatility. The factions behind the shops were from different realms, and the items sold in the shops were specialties from different realms. However, the people on the island of versatility had also considered what to do if some cultivators wanted to sell their goods. Some of them were not willing to sell to the Vientiane Chamber of Commerce and wanted to do their own business. Therefore, they had set up a space for those cultivators who did not own a shop to set up their own stalls. The market was open. Lu Yi had accidentally stumbled upon this place when he was strolling around yesterday, thus he was quite familiar with the place. Without further investigation, he went straight to a stall and picked up an irregular crystal the size of a fist. The crystal was fiery red in color, like a fire crystal. Lu Yi slightly activated the power of the talent tree and could clearly feel the surging power contained within it. The quality of this item was much higher than the earth core fire of the 9 continents. Lu Yi had been to the stall yesterday and was quite interested in this item. He had asked the stall owner about its name and learned that it was called the Dragon Breath Crystal. However, he had only inquired about it and did not show any intention of buying it, mainly because he did not know the price. Now that he was prepared, Lu Yi had an idea of the price of this item. Fellow cultivator, if you like it, feel free to buy it. This item is not expensive, only 800 spiritual jades each. Lu Yi casually asked, how was this thing born? The stall owner said, since it's called the Dragon Breath Crystal, it's naturally related to the Dragon Clan. To tell you the truth, 1,000 years ago, a giant fire dragon came to my domain and occupied a quiet place. When it was sleeping, the dragon breath it breathed out fused with some nearby minerals. After 1,000 years, the Dragon Breath Crystal was slowly born. Lu Yi nodded slightly. This stall owner's story was no different from what was recorded in the jade slip that Chao Xiang gave him. It seemed that he was not lying. The jade slip that Chao Xiang gave him not only recorded the prices of various fire attribute treasures, but also their origins and possible origins. It could be said to be very detailed. However, it was also because of this that Lu Yi realized that when a Dragon Breath Crystal appeared, it wasn't a single piece, but an entire field. In other words, this stall owner definitely had a huge pile of Dragon Breath Crystals. In front of him, Lu Yi took out the jade slip that Chao Xiang gave him. The Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce's Dragon Breath Crystals are only 800. Why are you selling them for 800? Normally, the items sold in the scattered market were cheaper than the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce. Only then would there be enough competition. Otherwise, who would come to the scattered market to buy things if everyone's prices were the same? The stall owner looked at Lu Yi, then looked at the jade slip in his hand and chuckled. So you came prepared. In that case, I'll give you 10 spiritual jades cheaper. He didn't blush. This was how business was. There was no need to talk about favors. If the other party didn't know, he would sell it at a higher price. If the other party knew, he would sell it at a lower price. Lu Yi didn't even blink as he mercilessly slashed. 500. The stall owner was dumbfounded. Fellow cultivator, you can't bargain like this. I need a lot. Lu Yi looked at him calmly. The stall owner said, no matter how much you want, I can't sell it for 500. This isn't my personal item. It's a product from the realm I'm in. The spiritual jades sold will be brought back to be divided among many people. I really can't give you this price. If you want to buy it for 500, you'd better go elsewhere. 550. Fellow cultivator, I advise you to be kind. If you act like this, you'll be killed when you leave the Myriad Elephant Sea. 600. If you're selling, I'll take it. If not, I'll leave. The stall owner stretched out his hand, indicating for Lu Yi to do as he pleased. Of course, Lu Yi wouldn't really leave. Bargaining required one to be thick-skinned and ruthless. If he succeeded, he would be happy. If not, he wouldn't lose anything. Give me your lowest price. Lu Yi looked at the stall owner. The reason why he took a fancy to this Dragon Breath Crystal was mainly because the quantity was large enough. If he went to buy other fire-type treasures, he might have to buy many more types. When the time comes, he would have to bargain one by one. He might even lose out. The stall owner grimaced for a while. He could tell that Lu Yi was sincere in buying it. He pondered for a while and said, to be honest, before I came out, the elders of this realm set the lowest price for me at 750. Seeing that you're so sincere, I'll sell it to you for 760. Any lower and I won't accept it. Since the lowest price set for you is 750, why are you increasing my price? The stall owner was speechless. I'm selling things here. You have to let me earn some hard-earned money, right? It's not easy for everyone to go out. Fellow cultivator, you have to understand each other. I've been selling my stall here for a long time. If I have the time, I might as well search for spiritual jades in this realm. Whatever I find is mine. Okay then. Lu Yi reluctantly agreed. The main reason was that he couldn't cut it down. Moreover, the stall owner was right. He did have to let others earn some money. A Dragon Breath Crystal was 40 spirit jades cheaper than the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce. It wasn't a small sum. After counting the spirit jades he had, Zhou Yuan left a little over 500 for cultivation and handed the rest to the stall owner. In the end, he obtained 24 dragon breath crystals. The majority of the spirit jades he had came from the Alpha Origin spirit jade mine. Although he had consumed some during his exploration of space outside the 9 provinces, he could still find some along the way. Overall, he didn't suffer any losses and even had a small surplus. After giving Nian Yuxian 1,500 spirit jades on Fengsuan Mountain, he was only left with a little over 13,000. But recently, he had obtained some spiritual jades from Tang Jun's storage ring. Previously, he had also killed 3 robbers and obtained a small amount of spiritual jades. The 3 of them were also poor, so he didn't know how long the energy contained in the 24 dragon breath crystals could last. Lu Yi suddenly realized that his comfortable days weren't over for long. He had to start worrying about cultivation resources again. Back in the 9 provinces, when his cultivation wasn't high, he spent all his time thinking about how to earn merits. Later on, he thought about earning battle merits. Now he no longer needed any merits or battle merits. What he needed now was spirit jades, and a large amount of them at that. The stall owner was in a good mood after selling the dragon breath crystals. He said, "Fellow cultivator, if you want more goods in the future, feel free to look for me." He clearly still had a lot of stock on hand. "How long have you been running this stall?" Lu Yi asked offhandedly. The stall owner's face was filled with melancholy. "Almost 3 years. Sigh, let's not talk about it. However, someone will soon come to replace me. My stall won't change. Fellow cultivator, feel free to come here." It wasn't easy to find a suitable stall in a place like this. Hence, many stall owners took turns with their companions from the same region to maintain the principle of not changing stalls. This also made it easier for regular customers to find them. If the 9 provinces could freely travel to and from the myriad elephant galaxy, they would likely use this method to sell their specialties. After all, the 9 provinces didn't have the capital to occupy a shop here. After bidding farewell to the stall owner, Lu Yi felt melancholy. When he came here, he still had some money in his pocket. However, he had spent most of it in just a few moments. The island of versatility was bustling with activity, but Lu Yi didn't know where to go. He had to go to the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce to retrieve his mountain pan saber in 10 days. What should he do during this period of time? There were places to stay on the island, but it would obviously cost a lot of spiritual jades. Lu Yi didn't want to spend so much money. It was unrealistic to just wait around. After thinking for a while, he soared into the sky and flew out of the island. There were some things that he wanted to test and verify. A moment later, he left the island of versatility. The moment he left, Lu Yi heard a crisp sound coming from the pass hanging on his waist. When he looked down, he saw that the pitch-black pass had cracked open from the middle. It was obviously broken. This also meant that he would have to spend another 5 spiritual jades to enter the island of versatility. He searched as he flew. He couldn't go too far from the island of versatility, but it would be inconvenient if he was too close. The closer he was to the island of versatility, the more cultivators there would be. A day later, Lu Yi finally found a suitable location and settled down. A moment later, he landed on a reef island with a radius of about 10 feet. It was not safe for him to travel alone. The island of versatility and many other large spiritual islands forbade personal fights, but no one would care on the island of versatility. In other words, if someone found Lu Yi an eyesore and tried to bully him, no one would stand up for him. Lu Yi remembered seeing a spiritual island being besieged on his way here. However, some things couldn't be avoided just because it wasn't safe. How could a cultivator be absolutely safe? To be safe, Lu Yi set up some defensive formations on the reef island. This way, he would at least have time to react if he was attacked. He then sat down with his legs crossed and sensed his surroundings. The seawater of the island of versatility was condensed from extremely dense starry sky energy. Although it was condensed and didn't dissipate, it would still affect the surrounding cultivation environment, especially the spiritual islands on the surface of the sea. Under Lu Ye's perception, he could tell that the location he was in contained more starry sky energy than normal starry sky. The starry sky energy was like the spiritual chi of heaven and earth to cultivators below the star constellation. Chapter 1385. Cultivators could cultivate anywhere in the starry sky because the starry sky energy was everywhere. However, the efficiency was very low. Just like the cultivators of the 9 prefectures, they could cultivate anywhere in the 9 prefectures. However, there were not many who did so. Even the Spirit Stream realm cultivators knew to head to the Spirit Stream battlefield. The cultivation environment of this reef island was much better than that of ordinary starry skies. Cultivators who did not have high requirements for their cultivation environment could definitely cultivate here. However, the efficiency was naturally not satisfactory. It was better to rely on spirit jades than to take spirit pills, but the advantage was that it was a cost-free transaction. However, no one would do so because it was too unsafe. There were people flying above their heads all the time who could cultivate in peace, especially when ordinary cultivators had to guard their minds during cultivation. It was easy for them to be ambushed. Of course, if one was on a spiritual island occupied by a powerful force, they would not have to worry about this problem. The ferryman, Feng Wanli, had said that some of the spirit islands had very rich starry sky energy and could completely satisfy the cultivation needs of cultivators in the constellation. If anyone could occupy such a spirit island, they would be able to save a lot of cultivation resources. On the Wanxiang Sea, there were many such spiritual islands. This was one of the reasons why the various forces were so keen on fighting for the ownership of spiritual islands. To them, spiritual islands were not only a place to stay, but also a cultivation resource. There was another more important reason. There were spiritual jade mines in spiritual islands. This was something that all the forces in the 4 galaxies coveted. 70% of the spiritual islands occupied by the various forces had spiritual jade mines of various sizes. Only the remaining 30% were considered deserted islands. In the starry sky, there were countless small and large domains. However, only the top domains could produce spiritual jade mines. How many top domains were there in the entire star field? Most of them were large domains. These domains did not have spiritual jade mines. However, as long as one was powerful enough, one could snatch one from them. What made people even more envious was that every spirit jade vein here was renewable. In other words, as long as one controlled the mining speed and frequency, they would never be completely depleted. This was because these spirit jade veins originated from the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Unless the 10,000 Elephant Sea disappeared one day, these spirit jade veins would continue to exist. During the mining process, these spirit jade veins would continuously absorb the energy from the sea and condense into new spirit jades. These things were still too far away from Lu Yi. He only came here to confirm 2 things. The first was naturally the speed of cultivation. Now that he had advanced to the middle stage of the constellation realm, the rate of consumption of spiritual jades would definitely be much faster than before. It was just unknown how much he would consume every month. Nearly 3 years ago, when he had just ascended to the constellation realm, he had experimented with it. At that time, he had concluded that he only needed to consume 120 spirit jades per month to satisfy his cultivation needs. Later on, as his strength slowly increased, this consumption also increased, but the increase was very small. Before his breakthrough, Lu Yi estimated that less than 200 spirit jades per month would be enough. What he needed to do now was to figure out the consumption after advancing. He took out 2 spirit jades and held them in his hands. As usual, he activated the power of the talent tree and controlled it to the fastest refining speed that he could accept. This way, he could achieve the highest cultivation efficiency and avoid wasting spirit jades at the same time. 3 days later, Lu Yi came to a conclusion. Right now, he needed about 400 pieces of spiritual jade every month. The energy consumption had doubled. Furthermore, this was only the state of having just advanced. In the future, as his strength increased and the depth of his bone marrow's refinement increased, it would definitely increase. Bitterness in secret, he only had about 500 spiritual jades with him. Didn't that mean it was only enough for him to cultivate for a month? What was he going to do? After calming himself down, he took out the 24 pieces of dragon breath crystals that he had spent a lot of money to buy previously and activated the talent tree's power to absorb them, replenishing the talent tree's fuel reserves. Feeling the increase in the talent tree's fuel reserves, he finally felt better. In the end, the dragon breath crystals that were worth 760 pieces of spiritual jades were indeed worth every penny. The fire-type energy stored inside was so dense that the earth core fire was not even fit to carry his shoes. There was at least a difference of 100 times. In this way, he did not need to worry about the talent tree's fuel for a short period of time. He sat cross-legged on the reef island for a long time. Originally, he wanted to wait for the surroundings to be empty. When the time came, he wanted to verify the second matter. In the end, he waited for a long time and did not find a suitable opportunity. There were always people flying around above his head. He decided not to wait any longer. He got up and walked to the reef island, staring at the deep sea in front of him. At the same time, in midair not far away, two figures flew past side by side. One was a white-haired old man, and the other was a young and beautiful girl. The girl's cultivation was only at the early stage of the constellation realm, and her spiritual energy waves seemed to be unstable. It was obvious that she had just advanced to the constellation realm not long ago. It was her first time here, so everything was new to her. The old man brought her along as they flew forward, occasionally saying something to her. The girl's little head kept nodding. Suddenly, she saw Lu Yi and pointed. "Master, look, someone wants to jump into the sea. I'm afraid there's something wrong with him." The old man raised his hand and slapped her arm down. He scolded, "Don't point and don't talk nonsense. The 10,000 Elephant Sea is formed by extremely dense starry sky energy. Although we constellation realms have started to absorb the starry sky energy for our own use to strengthen ourselves, there's no point in going too far. This seawater is highly toxic even to Rizhao. No one is willing to go deep into it. This is common knowledge in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Unless they're crazy, who would jump into the sea? You must remember this in the future." Plop. A soft sound came from below. The young girl said, "He's crazy." The old man's eyelids twitched and he quickly stopped. He really couldn't understand how there could be such a stupid person in this world. "Master, do you want to save him?" The young girl had a worried look on her face. The old man hesitated and shook his head. "No need. This person is probably new to the 10,000 Elephant Sea and wants to test the mysteries of the seawater. Let's not meddle and just watch." They waited quietly, but they still didn't see the figure of the person who jumped into the sea. After a few minutes, the old man sighed. "Let's go," the young girl said. "Aren't we waiting?" "No need. If he doesn't come up after such a long time, even an immortal can't save him. Even an immortal can't save him. He's definitely dead down there. If that person came up on his own earlier, he might still be alive. In the worst-case scenario, his foundation would be damaged and his cultivation would drop. However, if he stayed down for a long time, he would definitely die. Even Rizhao might not be able to last that long, let alone a young descendant who was only a constellation realm cultivator." The young girl followed behind the old man. She looked back with a face full of regret. She couldn't understand why he was still so stubborn when he was already a constellation realm cultivator. Under the 30,000 Elephant Sea, Lu Ye's figure kept sinking. As he observed, he saw large patches of dense gray fog burning in his talent tree. The fuel reserves that he had just replenished were being consumed rapidly. This undoubtedly meant that too many impurities or things that were harmful to him had entered his body. Most importantly, he didn't actively absorb the energy of the surrounding seawater. He didn't take the initiative, but the terrifying energy contained in the surrounding seawater was like leeches that smelled blood. They frantically drilled into his body. He finally understood why no one dared to easily enter the 10,000 Elephant Sea. In this place, regardless of whether you were willing or not, the energy in the seawater would enter your body. Moreover, it was much more efficient than any cultivation method. It was very easy to fill a cultivator's body with energy and then expand. In the end, it was inevitable that the cultivator would explode and die. Along with the seawater energy entering his body, there was also a large amount of impurities. These impurities were harmful to cultivators. Perhaps there was a chance to eliminate them later, but it would inevitably cost a great price. If it couldn't be eliminated, it would damage the cultivator's foundation. Activating spiritual power to protect the body couldn't completely isolate the impurities. Even with the help of treasures, it was difficult to offset them. Therefore, even if someone entered the 10,000 elephant sea, they couldn't stay for too long. He had the talent tree with him, so he didn't have to worry about his safety. However, the key was that this would consume too much of the talent tree's fuel. This situation was a bit like when he had entered the blood river to cultivate in the blood refinement realm. However, in comparison, the 10,000 elephant sea was undoubtedly many times more dangerous. When he didn't have to worry about the fuel for the talent tree in the future, perhaps he could come here to cultivate, because the efficiency of cultivating here was too high. However, he couldn't do that now. If he really used up all of the talent tree's fuel here, it would affect his future cultivation. He didn't continue to sink. Although he would rush out from the bottom of the 10,000 elephant sea, if he continued to sink like this, it would take a very long time. The fuel reserves he had now wouldn't be able to support him until then. Looking up, there was only a faint light above his head. Below his feet was a deep darkness. Just as Lu Yi was about to float up, he suddenly felt something quickly pass by him. He was startled and raised his hand to touch his waist. He touched nothing, and then remembered that the Pan Mountain Saber was still in the 10,000 elephant chamber of commerce. He released his divine sense, and could only move 3 inches away from his body. The suppression of divine sense in the sea was too strong. Without a saber in his hand, and with his divine sense restrained, Lu Yi didn't know what had just swam by him. Without hesitation, he activated his spiritual power, and rushed up while being vigilant of his surroundings. Just as he moved, Lu Yi felt that the current beside him was a bit abnormal. At the same time, with the help of the faint light, he saw something small quickly pass by. Without the slightest hesitation, he threw a punch in that direction. Lu Yi felt as if something had been smashed into smithereens. He scooped it up and continued upwards. A moment later, he returned to the reef island from before. He stared at the thing he brought back from the sea, and was dumbfounded for a moment. This 10,000 elephant sea actually had fish. Chapter 1386. The 10,000 elephant sea was extremely dangerous. Even cultivators couldn't stay in the sea for a long time. He thought that the sea would be lifeless, but he didn't expect that there would be a living creature in there. The thing brought back from the sea was about a foot-long snow-white flat, and half a finger wide. There was a translucent wing-like thing under its head, but its head was missing. It should have been blown off by Lu Ye's punch just now. However, judging from the remaining half of its body, it was clearly a fish. There was actually a fish in this dangerous 10,000 elephant sea. Lu Yi clicked his tongue in wonder. However, anything that could survive in the 10,000 elephant sea was definitely not an ordinary fish. Lu Yi seriously suspected that the thing in his hand was a type of star beast. Only certain star beasts could survive in this harsh environment. While he was sizing up the fish, he suddenly heard a rough voice. "Little fellow Taoist, you're really lucky." Lu Yi followed the voice, and saw a figure rushing over from the side. The spiritual energy fluctuations on that person's body showed that it was Yu Yao. In the blink of an eye, the person who spoke stopped in front of Lu Yi, and revealed himself. It was a middle-aged man with a full beard. He was tall and sturdy, and his face was bold and unrestrained. His large eyes were fixed on the dead fish in Lu Ye's hand, as if he was very interested in it. Lu Yi couldn't help but be vigilant. Ling Yu saw that I seemed to be really kind to her, so she humbly asked, "Is he called Lu Yi?" Qiu Pingyang left. According to me, once the Lu leaf salmon left the sea, they should be dealt with slowly. Otherwise, whether it was cooking or refining, its effect would be reduced. After watching Qiu Pingyang's figure disappear, Ling Yu took out a star map and checked it. Sure enough, she found a place called Fishing Island on the map. The tall and sturdy woman laughed. "Fellow Taoist is a straightforward person. You also lied to me, saying that you were going to invite a guest today, and were missing a main dish. So you wanted to go to the fishing island to see if you could catch a lu leaf. Who knew that these anglers would be so lucky that they didn't catch a single lu leaf? So they returned in disappointment. On the way there, you saw that he didn't have a single lu leaf. That was your luck, and also his luck. You often buy lu leaves, so if he sold that lu leaf, it would be worth at most 2,700 jade. Since Ling Yu had Asian to explain, he made up a story without thinking. You were looking at the sea, and it ran out to look at you. You were shocked and gave it a punch. That was extremely unlikely to happen. It was certain that the value of the Yangfei salmon was small, but a landleaf salmon was worth several thousand to tens of thousands of Bai Ling. Who would be tempted? Of course, the risk was also small. Originally, I was still thinking about where I should go to make money, but catching a woodleaf salmon on purpose gave me a direction. What kind of words were those? Yang Fei didn't understand. At that location, even an angel wouldn't be able to see the fishermen standing under the islands and reefs, fishing quietly with fishing equipment in their hands. Ling Yu understood. Thank you, fellow Taoist. What words? In my eyes, the smallest problem wasn't the lack of Bai Ling cultivation required by Ling. Although the fuel reserves of the talent tree were abundant in a short period of time, there was no way to replenish it. Naturally, the less stock there was, the worse it would be. Otherwise, when I needed it in the past, I couldn't find a way to replenish it. The tall and sturdy man seemed to have noticed this as well, and he smiled faintly. There's no need to be nervous, little fellow cultivator. Although there are no laws on the myriad phenomenon sea, there are still tacit rules. Under normal circumstances, those with lower cultivation levels will attack those with higher cultivation levels. I sighed in my heart. In the small Wanxiang Sea, there were so many cultivators. No one worked hard for Bai Ling and risked their lives for it. No one could blink and spend several thousand Bai Ling to buy a fish to cook. Catching the woodleaf salmon just now was due to luck, but I might not have such bad luck every time. Moreover, even if I didn't have that kind of luck, if I took out the woodleaf salmon, it would be difficult to explain to others. If I was targeted by unscrupulous people, it was very unlikely that I would expose the secret of not being able to stay in the Wanxiang Sea for long periods of time. The tall and sturdy woman looked at my vivid gestures and couldn't help but be stunned. She sighed with emotion. In the Wanxiang Sea, there were so many young people. No one could catch a woodleaf like that. Fellow Taoist, your luck is really amazing. It was precisely because of the delay in buying a woodleaf that the tall and sturdy woman was willing to pay Yang Fei 100 jade less. It couldn't be said that every cultivator who came here for the first time dreamed of getting rich overnight. That woodleaf was caught by him. After flying for more than half a day, we quickly approached the fishing island. If it were him, Qiu Pingyang would also have told Ling Yu that fishing would lead to poverty for 8 generations, and that playing with fish would ruin one's life. Fellow Taoist, he mentioned the fishing island just now. What is this place? Ling Yu asked curiously. There are angels. Yang Fei's words were true. Rightswa had something to do, so she jumped up and flew over to take a look at the situation. Right now, I only had a vague idea in my mind. I didn't have a clue as to how to implement it. No matter what, I would go to the fishing island first to take a look. It was true that wine and meat stink behind the door of the rich, but the road was not frozen to death. 28,000 jade was indeed a high price. The main thing was that the fish was picked up for free. Yang Fei was very happy. Just now she was worried about Bai Ling. Now that she thought about it, she had picked up a fortune for free. Therefore, she didn't care too much about it. Bai Ling was forbidden under my control. As for fishing, whether it was good or bad, it could not satisfy the complex and simple desires of those cultivators. This was because compared to other methods of getting rich, fishing could be considered a method that required a high entry level, but the benefits were extremely small. As cultivators, the smaller the risk, and the smaller the reward, the more interested they would be. This was especially true for those who were young and inexperienced. They always felt that they were favored by the heavens, and that there was nothing that could stump them, and that they would definitely succeed. In the end, they were often beaten by reality, and had to resign themselves to their fate in dejection. Because the price of woodleaf salmon kept going up and down, fewer and fewer people were tempted to join the fishing community. Even if he looked at our posture of not moving at all, he didn't seem to have gained anything. It's very valuable. The tall and sturdy woman nodded seriously. Depending on the quality and size of a woodleaf, the price can range from several thousand to several tens of thousands of Yang Fei. Yang Fei remembered my name and the direction of the small island I was pointing at. The tall and sturdy woman looked at me deeply. Fishing leads to poverty for 8 generations, and playing with fish will ruin one's life. There aren't many people who are lucky enough to retire from that field. In the end, they are the first to lose both their life and their wealth. The tall and sturdy woman said, "Outside this island is a place where fishermen gather. Because woodleaf salmon are extremely rare and precious, a group of people who specialize in fishing for woodleaf salmon have been born in the Wuxia Sea. This fishing island is where these fishermen gather." The tall and sturdy woman had probably seen very few people like Ling Yu. She knew that there were some things that had to be experienced in order to understand. Persuasion from others was useless. She chuckled and said, "That's right. If he didn't get anything last time, the angel will go to the small island to find you. You will buy a small amount of Yang Fei salmon for a long time. When he reaches the small island, he will say that he is looking for Qiu Pingyang. You will give him the worst price." Ling Yu was startled. I knew that the woodleaf was very valuable, but I didn't expect it to be that valuable. One had to know that a spirit treasure was only worth several thousand white spirits. Did that mean that a single Yang Fei salmon was equivalent to a spirit treasure? However, since ancient times, that kind of number was the number of fishermen. Generation after generation passed on. If no one came in and out, no one would join. Therefore, ever since the Wuxia Sea existed, the fishermen had never disappeared. Especially in recent years, there were no signs of them growing smaller. 2,800 white jades. The tall and sturdy woman directly quoted a price. Obviously, she didn't consider it. "I'll sell it," Ling Yu said straightforwardly. She said that the fish could be cooked and used in pills. Cooking it didn't have any negative effects on cultivators. At the same time, it was the main ingredient of several small pills. The price should be very low. Ling Yu said, "Daoist brother didn't explain much to you. Since he can see that you are a newcomer, if he really wanted to deceive you, the angel could have just quoted several hundred white spirits. Why did he have to quote such a low price?" After calming himself down, he asked, "What about the fish in your hand?" The tall and sturdy woman nodded. "It's a woodleaf salmon. It's a star beast that only exists in the Wuxia Sea. It's naturally fragrant, and its meat is delicate. It can be cooked and used in pills. If it's cooked, it can purify spiritual power and strengthen one's physique. If it's used in pills, it can slightly increase the medicinal efficacy of spirit pills. The main ingredient of several small pills is a part of the woodleaf." The tall and sturdy woman flew over and paid Ling Yu for 2,800 white jades. Then the deal was done. Yang Fei nodded. "How did you catch it with your bare hands?" The tall and sturdy woman asked with a mischievous expression. At the same time, she vaguely realized something. If that thing were to be sold, wouldn't it be very valuable? As if she had seen through Ling Yu's intention, the tall and sturdy woman mischievously advised, "Daoist friend, if you think it's boring, you can go and observe the 17 islands. This is a deserted island occupied by someone, and it's forbidden for people to come and go. However, you still have to advise him that Zhongyi wants to participate. There's a saying among these anglers that doesn't make sense." The Wuxia Sea was a place full of opportunities and opportunities. Outside it, weak cultivators from 7 different galaxies gathered. Every day, small quantities of goods were transported over, and small quantities of goods were digested. The daily consumption of white spirits outside was bound to be a small number. Some people were so poor that they could not even guarantee cultivation resources. But some people were so rich that they could not treat a woodleaf that cost several thousand white spirits as a dish. The further one went, the fewer anglers there were. The tall and sturdy woman said, "If the fish in his hand was broken, he could sell it for 7,000 white spirits. Unfortunately, the fish head has been lost, so the price will be reduced. You should know that the fish eye and fish brain are two extremely precious medicinal materials. She changed the topic. Taoist friend, are you willing to part with that wood leaf? The tall and sturdy woman was slightly stunned. She smiled and said, Taoist friend, you seem to be new here. Are you afraid that you'll misquote him? In a place like the Wanxiang Sea, any kind of carelessness would be excessive. Taoist friend, how much can you offer? Ling Yu asked. Ling Yu really knows how useless that thing is. Just now, I thought it was an angel's star beast, and almost threw it away. End of chapter. Chapter 1387. Fishing Island was not small. At least, it was bigger than most of the spiritual islands Lu Yi had seen. However, it was actually a deserted island that was not occupied by any forces. The main reason was that there was no spiritual jade mine on the island, so there was no value in occupying it. In the 10,000 Elephant Sea, there were many deserted islands like Fishing Island. Some of them had become the strongholds of certain forces or groups. Outsiders were not allowed to enter, as it would be considered a provocation. However, the anglers had always been very loose since ancient times, so they did not prohibit people from entering and leaving. When Lu Yi arrived, he saw that there were many people gathered here. Those who stood quietly at the edge of the island with fishing gear in their hands, their eyes fixed on a certain spot on the sea. They were undoubtedly fishermen who were fishing. There were also some people who were not fishing, but walking around to observe. Lu Yi guessed that these people were like him, interested in this matter, and came to observe. The anglers were standing at a distance of at least 1,000 feet from each other. The cultivators who were watching nearby also did not get close to them. They were also watching from a distance of 1,000 feet away. It could be seen that the people here, regardless of whether they were anglers or spectators, were silently abiding by an unspoken rule. Lu Yi looked around and randomly chose an angler. He hovered 1,000 feet away from him, making sure that the other party could see him from the corner of his eyes. It was not good to stand behind him. That would easily arouse the other party's hostility. If he was in their shoes, Lu Yi would not be happy if someone was staring at him from behind. Although he did not understand the rules here, he at least understood the way of life. The angler was a young man. He was handsome and tall. He was really good-looking. He stood on the shore, holding fishing equipment in one hand and a small wine gourd in the other. He took a sip from it from time to time, looking very leisurely. Lu Yi had his own reasons for choosing this angler to observe. Although he was young, he had interacted with quite a number of people. He could basically tell if a stranger was easy to get along with, or not with just a glance. This young man's face was very peaceful. He seemed to be an easy person to get along with. At the very least, he could ensure that he would not be chased away when he observed. Another point was that the way this person was holding the gourd reminded Lu Yi of Fourth Brother Li Baxian. Fourth Brother Li Baxian was also graceful and graceful. Lu Yi felt a natural sense of intimacy towards such a person. Sure enough, when the other party noticed that he was watching from the side, he only turned his head to glance at him and nodded slightly in greeting. He didn't have any intention of driving him away. He fished quietly while Lu Yi watched quietly. Time passed. Lu Yi discovered a problem, which was that whitey was very difficult to catch. On the entire fishing island, there were at least hundreds of people fishing like the young man. However, after watching here for more than half a day, no one caught anything. No wonder Qiu Pingyang said that he didn't manage to buy any fish on this island. Judging from the situation, it would be very difficult to catch a whitey. This was probably one of the reasons why Bailing was so expensive. This thing lived within the Myriad Sea, and ordinary cultivators utterly didn't dare to enter deep into the sea to capture it. They could only rely on this method of fishing, but the chances of obtaining it were extremely small as well. This caused the phenomenon of the rarer something was, the more valuable it was. After another half a day, the entire fishing island still had no harvest. 1,000 feet away from Lu Yi, the young man suddenly poured out the wine gourd in his hand, then turned to look at Lu Yi. Do you have any wine? Lu Yi was stunned for a moment, then nodded. Yes. Saying so, he flashed to the young man's side. and took out some wine jars from his storage ring. He usually didn't drink unless he had a small gathering with friends, so under normal circumstances, he wouldn't buy wine for himself. The wine in the storage ring was the spoils of war he obtained after killing people. They came from all kinds of sources, and were of different quality. Lu Yi took out a dozen jars in succession, and the young man hurriedly said, "That's enough, that's enough. You're too kind. How much are these?" Lu Yi waved his hand. "You can have them." It was nothing more than some wine, which wasn't worth much. The young man smiled and didn't refuse. "Then thank you for your kindness, fellow Taoist." Saying so, he stuffed the fishing gear into Lu Ye's hands. "Help me look after them for a while." Lu Yi instinctively took the fishing rod, stood there blankly, and then watched the young man pour the jars of wine into his wine gourd. "Fellow Taoist, you've been watching here for a long time. Have you seen anything?" The young man asked as he worked. Lu Yi thought for a moment and said, "Fellow Taoist, you don't seem to be fishing seriously." The reason why he said so was mainly because this young man was different from the other anglers. In Lu Ye's observation, the other anglers all looked as if they were facing a great enemy. Their expressions were tense, as if they could be caught at any time. They didn't even look away. But this young man's fishing posture was much more languid. He drank a little wine looking here and there. Especially when a female cultivator passed by nearby, he would definitely be attracted. The other anglers were quiet, but he didn't care at all. At this moment, he was chatting happily with Lu Yi, not afraid of scaring away the fish. Hearing Lu Ye's words, the young man couldn't help but laugh. He shook his head and said leisurely, "If there's fish, fish. If there's no fish, entertainment. Freedom, without the worries of the past, without the worries of the present. Only then can one attain the great Tao of fishing." The corner of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. It was just fishing. What was there to talk about? However, he felt more and more that this person's temperament was carefree. Changing the topic, the young man said, "Fellow Taoist, it seems that you're interested in fishing? Since I've drunk your wine, if you have any questions, feel free to ask." He was undoubtedly knowledgeable about the ways of the world. Since he had taken Lu Ye's wine for free, he was willing to share some of it. Lu Yi naturally wouldn't be polite, and asked him about fishing. Only then did he learn that fishing here was not as simple as he thought. First of all, the fishing equipment was very particular. It was specially refined for use here. It wasn't as if one could just casually get a fishing rod and come here to fish. In particular, the fishing line was refined with extremely pure magnetic ore. Only then could it be soaked in the sea for a long time. Otherwise, if it were an ordinary spiritual item, it would probably be eroded after entering the sea and wouldn't be able to last long. However, the biggest problem with the fishing line refined with magnetic ore was that it wasn't tough enough, so it was easy to break. This led to the fact that one couldn't raise the fishing rod too hard when catching fish. If it was too hard, the fishing line would break and the fish would run away. There was also a technique to catching fish. One had to let the fish slip out of the water slowly. Only then could one use an object to catch the fish. The bait was also specially made. It was a kind of spiritual pill specially used for fishing. It wasn't something that could be done by hanging an earthworm on it like in the mortal world. In addition, when fishing, one had to pay full attention and use the fishing rod in one's hand to sense the movement of the fishing line. This was because the white spirit only needed an instant to eat the bait, so it was meaningless to raise the rod too early. If it was too late, the bait would be gone and the fish would run away. This was also the reason why Lu Yi saw that the anglers all looked as if they were facing a great enemy. They were all focused on sensing the movement of the fishing line. It could be said that fishing here was an extremely difficult thing. One couldn't be distracted at all. It was no worse than being in a cultivation state. As the young man spoke, Lu Yi sensed the fishing line and found that it was indeed as he said. His spiritual sense could be extended through the fishing rod, so he could clearly sense the slightest movement of the fishing line. The young man's explanation was very detailed, and Lu Yi felt very comfortable. He was lucky to have met such a person who was willing to tell him these things. Otherwise, he would have wasted a lot of time exploring by himself. When the young man took the fishing rod from Lu Ye's hand, he kindly advised, Although fishing is interesting, and you may get rich overnight, fellow Taoist still needs to be careful. This is a field that can't be entered easily. Lu Yi nodded. I understand. Fishing can ruin 3 generations, but playing with fish can ruin one's life. The young man laughed. So fellow Taoist has heard of this saying. Then it's easy. This is not an alarmist talk, but something that happens every year. Some people want to get rich overnight, but in the end, not only do they delay their cultivation, but they also lose all their investment. If you still want to join under the premise that you are fully mentally prepared, you can tell me. Maybe I can help you a little. What do you mean? Lu Yi was puzzled. The young man said, some people have already left this field, but they still have fishing equipment. I can help you buy it at a cheap price and save you the trouble of buying new ones. Lu Yi's eyes lit up. Then I will have to trouble fellow Taoist. The young man said, do you really want to buy it? Of course. Lu Yi nodded seriously. I will contact them. You can also inquire about the specific price. I don't dare to say too much, but I can still help you get 70% of the price. As he said this, he took out a sound talisman to send a message. Obviously, he was going to contact the person who sold the fishing equipment. Of course, Lu Yi would not completely believe him. He did not avoid anything, and began to contact Fang Wanli in front of him, to inquire about the market price. After a while, he had a plan in mind. Fang Wanli was also advising him not to join the fishing industry so easily. Of course, he had good intentions. After a while, the young man said, a set of fishing equipment, including a fishing rod, 3 sets of fishing lines, a net, and 3,000 spirit jades. Can you accept? Lu Yi did a little calculation. This price was really not expensive. According to the market price he heard from Fang Wanli, such a set of fishing equipment would cost about 4,000 spirit jades. He immediately nodded. Yes, the young man said. Then I will ask someone to send it over. The person is nearby. He sent another message. Fellow Taoist, how should I address you? Lu Yi asked. Since this person had helped him so much, and was so enthusiastic, Lu Yi naturally had to inquire about his name. No matter what, they might become colleagues in the future and fight side by side in this place. The young man smiled leisurely. In the mortal world, those who carry sabers and swords are sabers and swordsmen. He raised the fishing rod in his hand. On Fishing Island, those who hold the rod are fishermen. Then, he patted the ladle hanging on the other side of his waist. What's my name? Lu Yi looked at the ladle and then at him. He hesitated and said, ladle. Fisherman. Chapter 1388. Of course, the young man's name wasn't Xiao Ku, but Pu Ku. Lu Yi didn't know what this person's parents were thinking to give him such a name. Or maybe he thought it was interesting and changed his name later. He didn't need to verify it. After reporting his name, he and Pu Ku finally got to know each other. Of course, he still used the pseudonym Li Taibai. The people in the Wanxiang galaxy were complicated and came from all kinds of backgrounds. He didn't dare to use the name Lu Yi from the 9 Heavens realm. If someone asked about his background, he would definitely say Wushuang continent. In Tang Jun's mind, he was Wushuang Li Taibai. After waiting for a while, a stream of light flew in from the side and landed not far away, revealing a petite figure. It was a woman with wheat-colored skin and a good figure. However, he couldn't see her face clearly because she was wearing a veil. The veil was obviously an extraordinary spiritual treasure that could block divine sense. She didn't wear much, so her calves, stomach, and even half of her arms were exposed. What caught Lu Yi's attention was the strange and complicated patterns on the woman's exposed skin. Ghost clan. Lu Yi recognized the woman's origin at a glance. The strange and complicated patterns weren't acquired, but the manifestation of the Ghost clan's bloodline. You want to buy? The Ghost clan woman looked at Lu Yi and asked. Lu Yi immediately understood that this was the person Pu Ku had contacted to sell fishing gear. He didn't expect it to be a ghost, and a woman at that. Although there were quite a few people fishing here, it was rare to see a woman. Among the hundreds of people, there were less than 20 of them. What was rare was that Pu Ku's gaze was actually focused on this woman. One had to know that all the female cultivators who passed by were followed by his gaze. especially those with good figures. He was especially focused on them. That's me. Lu Yi nodded. Have you agreed on the price? I won't lower the price. The Ghost Clan woman looked at Puku again. Puku smiled. Don't worry, I'll do as you say. 3,000 spiritual jades. The Ghost Clan woman took a deep breath and stretched out her hand to Lu Yi. Pay up. Lu Yi didn't spoil her and said indifferently, look at the goods first. The ghost woman tilted her head and took out a storage ring, tossing it to Lu Yi. Everything is inside, check it yourself. Lu Yi inspected the goods for a moment and confirmed that there was nothing wrong with them. Only then did he hand over the storage ring that he had prepared in advance. After the Ghost Clan woman finished her investigation, she let out a long sigh of relief and cursed. Damn it, I finally sold it. This thing is really my heart disease. As she spoke, she glared hatefully at Puku. This old lady must have had a hole in her head at that time. I was deceived by your flowery words. Parker was speechless. I advise you not to be impulsive. You were the one who saw the quick money and insisted on joining. Now you're blaming me. It's unreasonable. Anyway, it's all your fault. If you didn't catch Bai Ling back then, I wouldn't have stepped into the pit. As he spoke, he looked over at Lu Yi, and his eyes curved into crescents. Patting Lu Yi on the shoulder, he said, From now on, you're a friend of mine. If you want to kill someone, send me a message, and I'll give you a 20% discount. A friend of mine just like that? However, Lu Yi was concerned about something else. What's your name, fellow Taoist? Ghost. Why? Have you heard of my name? No. This is the first time I've heard of it. It's a novelty. Lu Yi had never heard of Ghost, but he knew Yu Ping. They were both ghosts, and they were both women. Lu Yi guessed that these two were related. Although the universe was vast, it wasn't very big. Do you have any musical notes? Come here. Ghost was very friendly and extended her small hand to Lu Yi. Lu Yi didn't want to give it to her, but he couldn't refuse, so he could only take out his own musical note. Ghost took it, nimbly imprinted her own mark on it, and tossed it back to Lu Yi. Remember, 20% off. As she said that, she turned and left in a carefree manner. After Ghost left, Lu Yi began to take out his fishing equipment. Then, under Puka's guidance, he tied a set of fishing lines to the fishing rod and fastened the hook. Puka also gave him 2 spirit pills as bait. Lu Yi thanked him and took them. After hanging the bait on the hook, he was ready to fish. Looking around to find a suitable place, Puka said, If you don't mind, let's do it here. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask me at any time. Lu Yi thanked him and cast the bait about 10 feet away from him. Although it was his first time, and the process was a little rough, he had observed for a long time before. So the process was not wrong. He also knew that he should focus on sensing the movement of the fishing line at this moment. Although no one on Fishing Island had any harvest this day, in fact, the frequency of fish eating the bait was still very high. From time to time, someone would lift the rod and retract the line. Some people even tried to fish, but for some reason they always failed. Lu Yi's bait had only been in the water for less than half an hour when he felt movement on the fishing line. Learning from the others, he raised the rod slightly and felt the line tighten. When the bait came out of the water, he saw that the spirit pill hanging on the hook was missing a corner. Obviously, it had been bitten by a fish. You have to rehook it. Although ghost spirits have no intelligence, they are still very sensitive to danger. If the hook is exposed, they will never eat the bait. Puka carefully instructed from the side. Lu Yi did the same and cast the bait again. After a few hours, Lu Yi retracted the rod for the last time. Looking at the empty hook with a helpless expression, he looked at it helplessly. When he first saw it, he realized that fishing here was extremely difficult. But when he really started, he found that the difficulty was not ordinary. In the past few hours, he also had the experience of catching fish twice. However, the first time, his action of retracting the rod was a little too big. As a result, the fishing line broke and the fish escaped. The second time he learned his lesson. The fishing line did not break, but in the process of fighting a battle of wits and courage with ghost spirits, it still escaped the hook. After a few hours, he had used up 2 bait pills a set of fishing line and a hook. It was a heavy loss. Don't worry, try more and you will succeed. Puka comforted him from the side. Seeing Lu Yi put away all the fishing equipment into his storage ring, he asked in surprise. You're giving up already? Lu Yi shook his head. There's no more bait. Go back and buy some. Where should I buy some? He couldn't keep using other people's bait. Although Lu Yi didn't know how many spirit jades a special bait pill cost, it couldn't be cheap. Puka had already given him 2 pills, so he couldn't keep using other people's bait. They were neither relatives nor friends, and Puka had already helped him a lot. Calculating the time, Lu Yi should go to the Vientiane Chamber of Commerce to retrieve his mountain pan saber. The Vientiane Chamber of Commerce sells it. Lu Yi nodded, said goodbye to Puka, and rushed out of the fishing island. 2 days later, Lu Yi returned to the Vientiane Island and went to the Vientiane Chamber of Commerce with ease. He had already sent a message to Chao Xiang before he came. When Lu Yi arrived, he went straight to the private room from before. Chao Xiang was already waiting. When he saw Lu Yi, he bowed first and pointed to the things on the table. Fellow Taoist Li, the saber is here. Please inspect it. Lu Yi took the mountain pan saber out of its sheath and poured spiritual energy into it. After a while he nodded slightly, yes. The cracks on the saber had disappeared, and there were no hidden injuries on the blade. The craftsmanship of the Vientiane Chamber of Commerce's refiners was quite good. If there are no mistakes, please return the jade slip you took last time. Lu Yi had forgotten about this. He quickly took out the jade slip and handed it over. Chao Xiang checked it and confirmed that there were no mistakes. He pointed to the jade box on the table and said, "These are the bait pills you need. There are 20 pills in a box." "What's the price?" Lu Yi asked. "1 bait pill is worth 100 spirit jades." Even though Lu Yi was mentally prepared, he couldn't help but be surprised. No wonder there was such a rumor in the fishing circle. Fishing required a lot more spirit jades than he thought. Based on the hours he spent fishing just now, he had already used up 200 jades. If a person fished for a day, he would use up 1 bait pill every 6 hours. That meant he would need 4 bait pills, which was worth 400 spirit jades. This didn't include the loss of fishing lines and hooks. It was only a day's worth of spirit jades. If there was a harvest during the day, he could still make a lot of money. However, if there was no harvest for a long time, no one would be able to endure it. That ghost looked like it had gone bankrupt from fishing. It was probably because it had bought a lot of fishing lines and bait pills. 20 bait pills were equivalent to 2,000 spirit jades, which was equivalent to the price of a spirit treasure. He had accidentally caught a white spirit before, and sold it for 2,600 spirit jades. If he threw in 20 bait pills, he might not be able to catch one if he was unlucky. If he added the cost of fishing gear, it would be 5,000 spirit jades. Lu Yi only had a little more than 100 spirit jades left. Naturally, he couldn't afford it. He had no choice but to take out a spirit treasure that he didn't use. He had about 5 or 6 spirit treasures that he didn't use. He had originally planned to let the sword gourd devour them when he needed them. Now, he could only use them for emergencies. After a moment of hesitation, Lu Yi took out all the spirit treasures that he didn't use and placed them on the table. Give me an estimate. There would be chances to get more spoils in the future. It wouldn't be too late to let the sword gourd devour them then. Right now he really needed more spirit jades. As the manager of the Chamber of Commerce, Chao Xiang was naturally experienced in dealing with customers. He could easily estimate the price of a few spirit treasures. 6 spirit treasures, some good and some bad, totaled up to about 13,000 spirit jades. This price was undoubtedly much lower than what Lu Yi had expected. Chao Xiang saw his doubts and explained with a smile. Fellow Taoist Li, the value of a spirit treasure depends on whether or not there is a need for it. The Chamber of Commerce has to bear the risk of not being able to sell the spirit treasures. Perhaps it will be a loss. Therefore, the Chamber of Commerce has a requirement for the price of spirit treasures. Generally, we will only buy at a 40% discount. If fellow Taoist Li feels that it is not suitable, you can take it to a shop outside or a market. The price may be higher, but it won't be too much. Chapter 1389. Chao Xiang was telling the truth, but it was not entirely true. At least, Lu Yi knew that if the spirit treasures recovered by the Chamber of Commerce could not be sold, they would definitely be melted to extract useful materials, so it was impossible to lose money. At most, it was a situation of neither loss nor profit. After bargaining with Chao Xiang for a while, he finally got an extra 500 jades. After paying the 2,000 jades for the bait pills, Lu Yi went straight to the stall selling the dragon breath crystals. It was still the stall owner. Seeing that Lu Yi came back to buy the dragon breath crystals so soon, he was naturally happy. According to the previous price, Lu Yi bought 15 dragon breath crystals. After leaving the stall, Lu Yi only had 200 jades left, but since he had bought what he needed, it was time to show off his skills. However, Lu Yi had to think carefully about how to do it without giving himself away. While urging the power of the talent tree to devour the dragon breath crystals, he flew in the direction of the fishing island. There was a reason why the fishermen were concentrated on the fishing island and its surrounding areas. White spirits were the most abundant on the fishing island and its surrounding areas. They were less distributed in other areas. In the past, there were anglers who did not believe it and went to other places to try, but the result was that not only did they not gain anything, but even the fish did not take the bait. Over time, any angler with a little bit of experience would not go to other places to do useless work, which led to the situation where the anglers gathered around the fishing island. Puku was the one who told Lu Yi about this. Otherwise, Lu Yi wouldn't have known about it. Fortunately, Puku mentioned it. Otherwise, Lu Yi would have gone fishing in a deserted place. In his plan, it was best not to let anyone see what he was about to do. Now he had no choice but to go to the fishing island. After rushing all the way, nearly 2 days later, he returned to the fishing island. Lu Yi was not going to stay with Puku anymore. In his previous observation, all the anglers here silently followed the hidden rule of staying 1,000 feet away from others. He had no fishing experience before, and Puku kindly guided him, so he deliberately let him stay 100 feet away from him. Now that he had some experience, it was not appropriate to squeeze with others. When he was looking around, trying to find a suitable place, Puku's voice sounded in his ears. "Brother Taibai, go over there." He turned his head and looked in Puku's direction, only to see him pointing in a direction. 4 hours ago, someone left due to some matters. There should be a seat over there. Puku explained. Lu Yi thanked him and flew in that direction. After a while he found a suitable spot. He happily went forward, steadied himself, took out his fishing gear, hung the bait, and threw the rod into the water. After a while, he sensed movement on the fishing line. Lu Yi tried to raise the rod, but as soon as there was movement, the baited fish were frightened away. Naturally, he caught nothing. Several times, the situation was exactly the same as a few days ago. Either he didn't catch the fish, or he let the fish escape in the process. The more he fished, the more Lu Yi felt the difficulty of catching a whitey. This was especially true when it came to fishing after catching the fish. That was truly a battle of wits and courage. Once the fish exerted force, the cultivator would have to release the force. Otherwise, the fishing line would likely break. When the fish did not exert force, the cultivator would have to exert force. Moreover, they would have to control their strength well. Only by letting the fish slip out of the water, little by little could they have a chance to catch the fish. The best Lu Yi could do now was to try his best to ensure that the fishing line would not break. But he was undoubtedly still very inexperienced in fishing. This required a long time of immersion in the water to become proficient. A few hours later, a bait pill was consumed. Lu Yi felt that it was about time to carry out his plan. He didn't spend so many spirit jades just to be a fisherman who depended on his luck. If that was the case, there was no need for him to work so hard. Dozens of miles away, on an island reef, a middle-aged man with a cold face who had been sitting cross-legged here looked around. After confirming that no one was watching him, he plunged into the sea. The middle-aged man was naturally Lu Yi, and it was his original body. The one who went to the fishing island was his clone. His face was different because he had activated the 1,000-face spirit tattoo. The reason for this arrangement was naturally because once he entered the sea, the consumption of the talent tree's fuel would be huge. His clone couldn't last for too long. Only his original body could persist in the sea. He dove all the way to the bottom of the sea to ensure that no traces could be seen from the surface of the sea. Only then did he rush to the location of his clone. The original body and the clone could sense each other. So the original body easily came to the bottom of the sea in front of the clone and found the fishing line and bait. He originally planned to activate the concealment spirit tattoo to hide himself, so that it would be more convenient for him to do things. But under the interference of the surrounding seawater energy madly eroding his body, he couldn't construct the spirit tattoo on the surface of his body at all. He had no choice but to stand still. A foot in front of him was the hook with the bait pill. "I'm a piece of wood." Before he came, there were a few white spirits swimming around this bait pill. They would take a bite of the bait pill from time to time, but when he came, these white spirits were scared away. As he stood there quietly, more whitey spirits were slowly attracted by the aura of the bait pill and gathered over. Lu Yi observed with rapt attention. He could clearly see how these fellows ate the bait, and also clearly see the appearance of these whitey spirits. The head of the white spirit he obtained before was smashed by his punch, so he really didn't know what it looked like. At this moment, this white spirit's head was long and pointed, which caused its mouth to be like an arrow. Moreover, there seemed to be fine fangs in its mouth, which allowed them to quickly take a bite of the bait pill when it passed by. Lu Yi held his breath and waited for a good opportunity, until a certain moment, a white spirit stopped in front of the bait pill and opened its sharp mouth. It looked like it was going to swallow the bait pill in one bite. Lu Yi's hand was as fast as lightning. He stuck out 2 fingers and clamped the fish's body. The white spirit struggled crazily, and the violent movement scared the other white spirits away. However, since it was clamped by Lu Yi, how could he let it break free so easily? He stretched out his other hand and grabbed it tightly. Success! This white spirit was bigger than the one whose head he had smashed. According to the information provided by Qiu Pingyang, this thing should be easily sold for 5,000 spirit jades. The initial investment would basically be earned back in an instant. However, there were 2 choices in front of Lu Yi. One was to put this white spirit away and find a buyer to sell it. He didn't have to worry about selling this thing, whether it was the Vientiane Chamber of Commerce, other shops, or even the open market. As long as he took it out, people would definitely buy it. Moreover, there wouldn't be a situation where the price would be lowered, because this thing was basically in a state where the demand couldn't meet the demand. If Lu Yi was only doing a one-off business, this choice would undoubtedly be more convenient and wouldn't need to think too much. However, he thought that there would be more white spirits in the future. If someone paid attention to him, he wouldn't be able to explain the origin of the white spirit. He couldn't tell people that he went into the sea to catch it, therefore, he still needed a pretense. Lu Yi buying fishing equipment and fishing here was just a pretense. The white spirit in his hand struggled fiercely. Lu Yi raised his hand, bent his middle finger, and gently flicked the fish's head, flicked and flicked again. He flicked until the white spirit stopped struggling so fiercely. Only then did he remove the bait pill from his hook and hook it up. On the shore, the clone began to raise the fishing line. The fishing line was taut, and one could clearly feel a fish struggling. The anglers on the left and right, and even the cultivators nearby, all gathered their gazes. However, everyone was just looking, because there were so many people fishing together on Fishing Island. The frequency of catching a fish was still very high. However, catching a fish alone was useless. The key was to get the fish out. Basically, no one would succeed in catching a fish out of hundreds of times. Therefore, everyone was used to it. However, as time passed, a scene that surprised everyone appeared. The fish on Lu Ye's side didn't leave the hook until a certain moment, when a smear of white appeared in the water. Then someone whispered, "It's out of the water, it's out of the water." The clone had already prepared the net. Almost at the same time that the smear of white appeared, he quickly scooped it up. The weight in his hand sank. When he pulled back the net, there was a fresh white spirit in the net. Lu Ye's expression was calm. He stepped forward and removed the hook from the white spirit's mouth. 7 or 8 silhouettes had already arrived in a flash and surrounded him. They were the cultivators who had been looking around earlier. Seeing this situation, Lu Yi didn't panic. This was because when he chatted with Pu Ku before, he knew some of the situation here. The cultivators who were looking around on Fishing Island weren't just those who were bored and wanted to enter this field. There were also some people who came from big factions and were specifically in charge of buying fresh white spirits. The people who had gathered around were undoubtedly the representatives of the various major forces in charge of this matter. One of the old men cupped his fists at Lu Yi and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, you look unfamiliar. Are you new here?" Lu Yi nodded. This matter couldn't be hidden from these people who were here all year round. When Lu Yi came here before, he met a few of them. "Is this fish for sale?" the old man asked again. "Yes." The old man nodded and didn't say more. He looked at the white spirit in Lu Ye's hand and said, "I'll pay 4,600 jade for this fish. What do you think?" "That's not right." Lu Yi looked at the others. This old man obviously thought that he was a newcomer and was bullying him for not knowing the rules. Moreover, 4,600 jade was indeed a little too little. The old man smiled. "So someone has taught you. In that case, let's do it according to the rules." The so-called rules were the on-site auction. These big factions were in charge of buying fresh white spirits here. Naturally, they weren't friendly. Every time a white spirit was caught and was willing to be sold, they would bid for it. The highest bidder would get it. Chapter 1390. These people had been buying and selling whitey spirits for years, so they were quite accurate in estimating the price. They could basically guarantee that it would be the most normal price. If they were lucky, they could even sell it for a higher price than usual. For example, Qiu Pingyang was in urgent need of a whitey spirit when he was hosting a banquet. If he had participated in the auction at that time, he would have definitely offered a higher price. The 7 or 8 people talked back and forth, and the price of whitey spirit kept rising. The auction only ended when someone offered 5,300 jades. Lu Yi handed whitey spirit over to the person and received 5,300 jades. The deal was over. Lu Yi did not have to worry about losing money because he would not lose money in this kind of auction. He also saved himself the trouble of finding a buyer. Although he did not have to worry about the demand for whitey spirit, it would still take him a lot of time to return to the island of versatility. The 7 or 8 people around him dispersed and waited for another opportunity. The cultivator who got whitey spirit called for a ferry and left quickly. Obviously, he was going to take it back and deal with it. The fresher whitey spirit was, the more delicious it was, and the more valuable it would be to make it into a pill. Even if it would not go bad in a storage ring, it would not be safe to keep it for a long time. Therefore, normally, once whitey spirit came out of the water, it would either be eaten or made into a pill within 2 or 3 days. No one would keep it no matter what. Lu Yi packed up his fishing equipment and hung the bait pill on the hook again. A jealous voice came from 1,000 feet to his left. "The newbie's luck is so good." There was a strange legend in the angler's circle. It was said that newbies were always lucky. Usually it was very easy for them to gain something. Of course, it was not always true. Take Ghost Clan's Ghost Clan for example. After she joined the industry on a whim, she never felt the joy of fishing until she went bankrupt. All she had was endless anxiety, pain, regret, and frustration. Lu Yi had caught something in less than half a day. In the eyes of the experienced fisherman, what else could it be other than good luck? Lu Yi threw the rod into the water and put away the bait pill, leaving an empty hook behind. Then he quickly swam away. He had already caught 1 fish, and it would not be good to catch a second one in a short time. Therefore, he could not stay in the water any longer. Taking away the bait pill was to avoid unnecessary waste. This thing was worth hundreds of jades. Dozens of miles away, his true body returned. Some people passed by when he was out to sea, but they did not find it strange. There were many cultivators gathered in the Wanxiang Sea. There were bound to be some who were curious about the deep sea and went down to take a look. As long as they did not stop, there would not be much of a problem. Holding a piece of spirit jade in each hand, He sat down cross-legged. While cultivating, he also deduced the defensive spirit rune that he had not completed previously. That was good. When his main body stayed in the sea, it was equivalent to passively cultivating. Furthermore, the cultivation efficiency was extremely high. The only thing he needed to pay was the consumption of the talent tree's fuel. When they returned to the island, they would also cultivate. This way, not only would their cultivation not be delayed, but it would also be faster than normal cultivation. As for his clone, when the time was right, he would be able to catch one. That way, he would never be short of spirit jades. Lu Yi suddenly realized that the 10,000 Elephant Sea was indeed a great place. However, he knew that he would not be able to live so comfortably forever. No one was a fool, especially cultivators. Every one of them had lived for God knows how many years, and were very cunning. Even if he caught a whitey spirit every few days, as time passed, it would definitely attract the attention of others. It did not make sense that Li Taibai was the only one who could catch so many whitey spirits so steadily. Therefore, Lu Yi decided to catch a few whitey spirits, and not hang them on the hook. He would let his main body change its appearance, and send it back to the island of versatility to sell. This plan would last longer, and be more discreet. After a few days, without the help of his main body, his clone did not catch anything. Not only did he not catch anything, but even a set of fishing lines was broken. He suffered heavy losses. Of the 3 sets of fishing lines that Ghost sold to him, only the last one was left. When he felt that the time was right, his main body set out again. Just like last time, he lurked beside the hook with the bait pill, waiting for a good opportunity to strike. He caught a whitey spirit, and flicked it a few times to make it less active. This way it would be easier to fish. The whole process went smoothly. When Lu Ye's second whitey spirit came out of the water a few days later, the anglers on the left and right were dumbfounded. They had worked hard here for more than 10 days, and each of them only caught 1 fish, barely making a loss. However, Lu Yi had caught 2 in just a few days. Was a newbie's luck really that good? The cultivators who were in charge of buying whitey spirits gathered again. This time, the whitey spirits were much bigger than last time, selling for almost 6,000 jades. If the previous one could be considered as earning back the investment, then this one was a profit. In just a few days, he had earned more than 6,000 jades. For a loner like Lu Yi, this was undoubtedly very satisfying. A few days later, as Lu Yi caught his third whitey spirit, and sold it for more than 5,000 jades, the anglers on the left and right finally could not sit still. It was quite uncomfortable to just look at other people's gains. The anglers on the left and right seemed to know each other. Lu Yi did not know what they were communicating with each other through spiritual sense. Then he saw 2 guys approaching him from the left and right. Immediately, the 2 of them tacitly threw their poles into the water about 10 feet away from Lu Yi. The one on the left was the young man who spoke sourly before. He had a big mole beside his nose, which was very conspicuous. The one on the right was an old man, who looked to be in his 50s. Noticing Lu Ye's gaze, the young man did not bother to pay attention to Lu Yi at all. The old man, however, chuckled. "Let's fish together. Fellow Taoist, there seems to be a lot of fish here. You can't catch all of them alone." That was a bit unkind. They were 1,000 feet apart, and it was not that these 2 did not catch any fish. They just could not slip up. There was no reason for them to squeeze together with him. Lu Yi guessed that this was probably due to jealousy and unwillingness. The way the 2 of them were acting could be considered as bullying a newcomer like him. If it were a fight, Lu Yi would not hesitate to cut them with his knife. However, everyone was just fishing. Fighting and killing would be a bit of a killjoy, and it would easily incite public anger. The most important thing was that these 2 people should have other acquaintances. If Lu Yi really fought with them, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. He only knew Pu Ke, whom he had met by chance, so he couldn't expect him to help him. In the end, being 1,000 feet apart was just a tacit rule. No one asked everyone to do so. Lu Yi glanced at the old man and looked away. He did not say anything. The old man and the young man with the mole looked at each other from a distance. They smiled slightly, looking rather smug. Deep under the sea, Lu Ye's main body swayed and slowly found the location of the old man's bait. To be honest, if the old man was not so close to his clone, it would not have been easy for Lu Yi to find his bait. The 10,000 elephant seas water suppressed spiritual sense too much. For a mid-stage constellation cultivator like Lu Yi, his spiritual sense could only leave his body by 3 inches. It could be said that spiritual sense was completely useless under the sea. The depths of the sea were dark. Lu Ye's main body could easily find the location of his clone's bait, because they could sense each other, and his clone could accurately guide them. If they were really 1,000 feet apart, Lu Yi could only try his luck and find someone else's bait. However, since they were so close, it was much easier to find them. After finding the old man's bait, Lu Ye's main body gently pinched it and exerted force. The old man immediately felt it. His fishing skills were undoubtedly impressive. He only raised the rod slightly and did not use too much force. However, the instant the fishing line was pulled taut, the old man's expression changed. Before he could adjust, the fishing line snapped. Looking at the snapped fishing line, the old man did not feel any heartache. Instead, he was very excited. Big fish. Only a big fish could exert so much force. If such a thing could be fished up, it could easily be sold for tens of thousands of spirit jades or even more. He quickly took out another set of fishing lines, attached the bait, and threw the rod into the water. Lu Ye's main body had already reached the other side. He found the young man with the mole's bait, grabbed it and tugged. Therefore, the young man with the mole suffered the same treatment as the old man. His expression also began to become excited. He secretly imagined how wonderful it would be if he caught a big fish. For the next half a day, the old man and the young man with the mole kept raising the rod. However, without exception, either the bait was lost or the fishing line snapped. Most of the time, the bait was lost. The main thing was that Lu Yi did not know how many sets of fishing lines they had, so he did not want to lose too many. Otherwise, if they ran out of fishing lines and stopped fishing, he would not be able to get more bait. Such an encounter made the old man and the young man with the mole even more certain that they had caught a big fish. This was because ordinary white spirits would take small bites of bait. Only the big fish that exceeded the norm would swallow the bait in one bite, because their mouths were big enough. However, as time passed, their expressions began to change from excitement and anticipation to depression and despair. Until a certain moment, the old man looked at the empty fishing hook with a melancholic expression. Why is the fishing today so irritable? The bait he had brought had been used up. In less than 2 hours, he had lost more than 3,000 spirit jades. This was something that he had never encountered in his decades of fishing career. He looked at Lu Yi in confusion. "Little friend, is there any movement on your end?" He and the young man with the mole kept raising their rods while Lu Yi was in the middle. However, Lu Yi's end was calm. There were no signs of the fish taking the bait. Obviously, something was not right. Lu Yi lifted his rod lightly and picked up an empty fishing hook. He said casually, "I was thinking too much and forgot to use the bait." The old man blinked. He did not know if Lu Yi was telling the truth or not. However, based on his experience with the young man with the mole, Lu Yi had avoided a disaster without using the bait. At the very least, he had reduced unnecessary losses. The old man left disheartened. He wanted to go back to the island of versatility to buy some bait pills. The young man with the mole persisted for a while, but it was inevitable that he would repeat the old man's mistake. He was obviously very angry before he left. This was the most depressing thing for anglers. There was a big fish, but they could not catch it. Chapter 1391. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye. In the angler's circle, Lu Yi was gradually becoming famous because on average, he would get something every few days. This was rare in the angler's circle. It could no longer be explained by luck. In the eyes of the other anglers, Lu Yi had undoubtedly grasped the essence of fishing. He had surpassed them in terms of fishing skills alone. There were still a few people in the circle who were proficient in fishing like Lu Yi. Without exception, these people relied on fishing to make a fortune and satisfy their own cultivation needs. But in comparison, These people had all worked in this field for hundreds of years, or even longer. A young beginner angler like Lu Yi was truly unique. This situation was naturally Lu Ye's intention. If not for this, he could have caught as many white spirits as he wanted. But that would definitely attract covetous eyes. The current situation was quite good. With a few old seniors ahead of him, although Lu Ye's gains were coveted, they were not too eye-catching. Apart from the white spirits he fished, Lu Yi would occasionally catch one, and have his main body, send it back to the island of versatility to sell. The selling price was not much different from the auction price on the island. At most, it would take a little more time to travel back and forth. Moreover, he did not need to fly anymore. There were many ferries on the island of versatility. He could summon one for a few spirit jades. The customers he sold his fish to were not fixed. Sometimes, Lu Yi would send his fish to the island of versatility to sell. Other times, he would randomly choose a shop and ask if they wanted to buy fish. Basically, anyone who had the ability to open a shop on the island of versatility would not refuse his peddling. He rarely went to the scattered markets. The people there were complicated, and many people were not wealthy. With so many people, it was not a suitable place for peddling. Fishing and catching, Lu Yi could basically guarantee that he would reap a white spirit every 3 days. In this half a year, the number of spirit jades that passed through his hands was at least 300,000. 300,000 spirit jades was undoubtedly an unimaginable fortune for any mid-stage constellation cultivator. If he only used it for cultivation, he would not have to worry about advancing to Yu Yao. But in reality, Lu Yi couldn't keep these spirit jades in his pocket for too long. This was because every time he obtained spirit jades, he would buy fire-type treasures, such as dragon breath crystals, to replenish his talent tree's fuel reserves. Regardless of whether it was catching fish or fishing, he would need his main body to enter the myriad phenomenon sea, and he would have to stay there for a long time. This caused the talent tree's fuel to be greatly depleted. Lu Yi only had 1,000 spirit jades in his ring of holding for a long time. Only once did he manage to save up more than 30,000 spirit jades, and buy a small star boat. For constellations, if they had the ability, they would need a star boat, which would make it easier for them to travel. However, star boats were too expensive. If a constellation didn't have a powerful background, it would be very difficult for them to accumulate enough money to buy a star boat by themselves. It seemed that he had not gained much from his hard work in the past half a year. But in reality, Lu Yi had made great progress in his cultivation. Every time he entered the Wanxiang Sea, it was a kind of passive and rapid cultivation. To a cultivator, what could be more important than cultivation? Although normal cultivation could increase his cultivation more than going deep into the Wanxiang Sea with the same amount of spirit jades, the time required was many times longer. Lu Yi's actions were equivalent to using spirit jades to buy time. He could advance to late-stage constellation realm faster than other cultivators. But correspondingly, the amount of spirit jades he had to spend was probably 10 times, or even more than others. However, as long as he had whitey spirit to fish, this was not a problem. In the Wanxiang Sea, there was an endless supply of whitey spirit. So what if Lu Yi caught sunshine here? No one asked him about his fishing techniques. This was his own secret, and it was also a way to make money. There was no reason for him to share it with others. On the other hand, a few of the cultivators from the major factions who were responsible for keeping watch here expressed their intention to recruit him. To the major factions behind these cultivators, whitey spirit items were precious because they were rare. They could afford to buy as much as they wanted. On this fishing island, not only were there people responsible for buying fish, there were also many people who were responsible for fishing. If they could recruit Lu Yi, they would have a stable channel to buy whitey spirit in the future. This kind of recruitment was very loose. If Lu Yi agreed, not only would he receive a certain amount of spirit jades as his monthly salary, he would also be able to buy the whitey spirit he caught at a normal price. However, he would only be able to sell to the faction that recruited him. In other words, he would become that faction's exclusive angler. Lu Yi naturally refused this kind of recruitment. Cultivators were afraid of restrictions. No matter how loose the restrictions were, restrictions were still restrictions, especially when he didn't have to worry about spirit jades. After half a year, Lu Yi got to know many anglers, but they were all just nodding acquaintances. He slowly became familiar with Pu Ku. Occasionally, when Lu Yi pretended to go back to the Wanxiang Island to buy bait pills, this guy would reserve a fishing spot for him and wait for his return. He was an old angler and was usually generous. Many anglers had received his kindness, so they would still give him face. On this day, the clone was fishing with Pu Ku 1,000 feet away when a beautiful female cultivator passed by. As expected, Pu Ku's gaze was like a leech biting at her, causing the female cultivator to glare at him fiercely. Pu Ku didn't feel awkward. Instead, he smiled gently at the female cultivator. According to him, there were many things in the water. Others only took a sip, but he always took a ladle. However, this guy was handsome, had a beautiful smile, and had a good cultivation base, so he could still win the favor of many female cultivators. Often, as Pu Ku fished, he would tell Lu Yi that he had something to do and had to leave, asking him to help watch the fishing position. In less than half a day at most, he would come back refreshed. As for what he was going to do, Lu Yi didn't know. While Pu Ku was flirting with the female cultivators passing by, under the sea, his main body had already caught a whitey spirit and hung it on Pu Ku's hook. When he first met this guy by chance, he explained a lot of fishing knowledge to him. He even bought him fishing equipment at a cheap price and gave him 2 bait pills for free. Lu Yi didn't forget this favor. Hence, in the past half a year, Lu Yi would occasionally help him catch a fish. After all, his main body was going to hang a fish for his clone. It was just a matter of convenience. He reluctantly watched the beautiful female cultivator leave. Suddenly, a violent wave of spiritual power came from afar. Pu Ku's hand trembled. The fishing line broke. He couldn't care less about the fishing line. He leaped into the air and looked in the direction of the commotion. Lu Yi flew up as well and looked in that direction beside him. They were too far away to see the situation. He only knew that there were experts fighting over there. Sunshine? Pu Ku was shocked. It's sunshine. It was normal to fight and kill on the Wanxiang Sea. However, it was mostly limited to Yu Yao and Yu Yao. At least, Lu Yi had never seen Sunshine fight in the past half a year. He hadn't even seen a Sunshine Realm expert. This was because there were only 2 or 3 Sunshine Realm experts in the entire Wanxiang Sea. Sunshine Realm experts from other galaxies were not allowed to stay here for long. They would leave quickly when they passed by. Under Sunshine, the number of Yu Yao from each galaxy was strictly limited. This was the way the Wanxiang Galaxy managed the Wanxiang Sea. It was also the tacit rule of the 4 galaxies. The experts from the 4 galaxies came here to occupy Spirit Island and divide the resources that belonged to the Wanxiang Galaxy. It was unreasonable. Hence, even if the rules of the Wanxiang Sea were unreasonable, they wouldn't break them easily. Instead, they would help to protect them. If everyone followed the rules, everyone would have meat to eat. If anyone broke the rules, it would only lead to conflict between galaxies. No one would benefit. Hence, when they sensed a Sunshine Realm expert fighting, all the cultivators on Fishing Island were shocked. They didn't know what was going on. Lu Yi had only been here for a short time, but the others had been here for many years. As far as they could remember, there was no precedent of a Sunshine Realm expert fighting in the Wanxiang Sea. Suddenly, a shout came from that direction. "How dare you!" Another shout came. "Stop!" Then an even more intense fight broke out. The cultivators on the fishing island all looked solemn. If they had only sensed one Sunshine Realm expert fighting, then it wasn't just one now. There were 3 or 4 of them. They didn't know where the Sunshine Realm expert who attacked first came from. However, the one who attacked later was definitely a Sunshine Realm expert from the Wanxiang Galaxy. They were guarding this place. When they sensed something unusual, they naturally had to intervene. During the fight, the originally calm sea rippled and turned into waves. The waves surged from the direction of the fight. It was obvious how fierce the aftermath was. Suddenly, the aura of an expert disappeared. Pu Ku's eyes almost popped out. Lu Yi also narrowed his eyes. They turned to look at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. If their senses weren't wrong, a Sunshine Realm expert, had died. In other words, a Sunshine Realm expert was killed in the fight just now. How long had it been? From the start of the fight until now, it had only been a few dozen breaths, and Sunshine had already died. They didn't know if it was the one who started the fight, or the local Sunshine Realm expert, who guarded the Wanxiang Island. The aftermath of the fight wasn't over yet. Puka couldn't help but shrink his neck. The sky is falling. It was certain that the one who died was the Wanxiang Galaxy's Sunshine. If it was the troublemaker who died, then the fight should have ended by now. Since the fight was still going on, it meant that the troublemaker wasn't killed. This was the Wanxiang Galaxy, the Wanxiang Sea. If their Sunshine Realm expert was killed, it would be a slap in the face. How could the Wanxiang Galaxy let this go? If it was only Xingxiu and Yueyao who died, it wouldn't have much of an impact. However, if it was Sunshine, then the significance was completely different. Ha ha ha, the Wanxiang Galaxy is just Esozo. The laughter of an old man suddenly came from the direction of the battle. Remember, this is only the interest. Oh no, Puka whispered. They're coming toward us. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Lu Yi falling down from the corner of his eye. He cursed Li Taibai for his lack of loyalty and quickly descended. Chapter 1392. The reactions of the constellations were not slow. When they noticed the fight between Ri Zhao and the others, they all flew up to the sky to observe. Now that they realized something was wrong, they immediately fell down like dumplings, afraid that they would block the other party's path and be killed. If they were killed, there would be no place for them to complain. When Puka landed, Lu Yi had already thrown out array flags in all directions. He activated his spiritual power and constructed his spirit patterns, instantly forming an array. Puka did not hesitate to squeeze together with Lu Yi. When Lu Yi set up the array, he also took out a defensive spiritual treasure and covered the surroundings. In an instant, a layer of light screen circulated. The others were all using their own methods to protect themselves. A majestic aura swept over from the direction of the fight. It was so fast that even the fairy could not compare to it. In the blink of an eye, a figure swept across the sky above the fishing island. Although he did not use any means, his violent aura spread out in all directions, squeezing the void. Puka's protective spiritual treasure and Lu Yi's protective array creaked, as if they were under heavy pressure at this moment. Lu Yi looked up to see who it was that dared to cause trouble on the Wanxiang Sea, and even killed a local star system's Ri Zhao. With a quick glance, he vaguely saw an old man with wild hair and beard. The old man flashed past the fishing island and disappeared into the distance. 2 breaths later, another 2 figures flew over, one after the other. Obviously, it was the local star system's Ri Zhao who was chasing after them. No one knew if he could catch up with them. The entire fishing island was silent. Everyone was shocked. After a long time, they slowly came back to their senses. Lu Yi withdrew the array, and Puka put away his spiritual treasure with a face full of lingering fear. Fortunately, the 2 of them reacted quickly and reacted immediately when they realized something was wrong. Otherwise, just the violent aura of the 3 Ri Zhao, when they flew over, was enough to injure them. 1 against 3, and even killed a Ri Zhao. Who is this person? Puka was shocked, but there was also some longing in his shock. The matter was obvious. On the Wanxiang Sea, there were 3 local star systems Ri Zhao. The troublemaker killed 1 of them, and then the remaining 2 chased after him. They were all under the sun, and even if their cultivation levels were different, it was still extremely difficult to accomplish such a thing in such an environment. How would Lu Yi know who the other party was? He was just a Xingxiu mansion, so he was not qualified to inquire about such matters. Furthermore, he did not have any channels to do so. However, judging from the old man's words, it was clear that he had a grudge against the Wanxiang Galaxy. In the starry skies, revenge was a common occurrence. What was abnormal was that this was a fight between 2 people in the Sunshine Realm, and in the Wanxiang Sea. Lu Yi thought that this matter would cause a storm, but he didn't expect that the Vientiane Galaxy didn't do anything out of the ordinary when Nicho was killed. They didn't even sense any movement from the Vientiane Galaxy. The entire 10,000 elephant sea was the same as before. However, this matter obviously wouldn't end just like this. Lu Yi reckoned that the myriad phenomenon galaxy was definitely working in secret. Puku even speculated that the killer had already been killed by the Wanxiang galaxy, which was why there was no movement from the Wanxiang galaxy. Lu Yi didn't think so. If the troublemaker had been killed, the Wanxiang galaxy would definitely spread the news to regain their reputation. However, since they didn't spread the news, it meant that the troublemaker was still alive and well. These things were of a high level after all. It wasn't something that someone like him, who had no foundation or channels, could understand. He stayed on Fishing Island for a long time as usual. There was no news from Chaoxiang. Although the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce had comprehensive information, it wasn't easy to obtain information from a certain galaxy if they didn't have any interaction with it. His doppelganger was fishing, and his main body was usually meditating on a reef island, cultivating and deducing spirit runes at the same time, except when he needed to go into the sea to catch fish. After half a year, a new protective spirit rune based on defense had been finalized. The overall effect had met Lu Ye's requirements, and was enough to support a Xingqiu realm battle. Lu Yi named it Sacred Guard. This was the third new spirit rune he deduced with the help of the talent tree, based on his own attainments in the Tao of Spirit Runes, in addition to Void and Divine Blade. The next rune to be deduced was Twin Breath and Branch. The reason he chose this spirit rune was naturally because of the formation disc. Before reaching the Xingqiu realm, the Twin Breath and Branch formation disc had played a huge role. Whether it was during the bloody battle in the insect race's secret realm, or during the expedition to the blood refinement realm, the formation disc had greatly reduced the losses of the 9 states. However, when one's cultivation reached the constellation realm, the range of movement would increase, and the effects of the formation disc would be greatly weakened. Unless it was a formation battle like the one in the Black Abyss to protect one's own camp. In a battle at the constellation realm, the existing Samsara-connected Qi formation disc was already useless. The 9 states didn't have any high-end combat power at the moment. They were all at the early Xingqiu realm. Even if Lu Yi left behind a few purple talismans and jade talismans, how many dangers could they deal with? Who knew how many years it would take for these early Xingqiu realm cultivators to advance to Yuyao? Therefore, the 9 states' greatest weakness was their lack of ability to compete with the strong. Even if they couldn't fight against the sun, they needed to at least have the ability to fight against Yuyao. The Twin Breath and Branch formation disc was a hope, but the premise was that Lu Yi could deduce a Twin Breath and Branch spirit rune that could cover a larger range and meet the needs of the Xingqiu realm during battle. With his current attainments in the Tao of Spirit Runes and his previous successful experiences, Lu Yi felt that this wasn't difficult. He just needed to spend some time. In fact, he already had some ideas about this new Twin Breath and Branch spirit rune. He would be able to successfully deduce it in a few months, because he now had a lot of time to do this. 2 months later, on Fishing Island, Lu Yi stood with a frown on his face. The situation wasn't right. In the past, no matter where he chose to fish here, a fish would come to eat the bait in an hour at most. However, several hours had passed today, and there wasn't even any movement from the bait. His original body swam under the sea for a while, but he didn't see any trace of whitey. It wasn't like this yesterday. Just yesterday Lu Yi caught a whitey to sell. It was as if Bai Ling had disappeared without a trace overnight. What made Lu Yi even more surprised was that the anglers actually began to put away their fishing poles one after another, shaking their heads and flying away from Fishing Island with disappointment. Puku wasn't here. He didn't know which female cultivator he was hooking up with. Lu Yi sent a message over, wanting to ask about the situation. Not long after, Puku replied, "It should be the fish stillness period." What the hell? Lu Yi had a bad feeling. In the mortal ocean, those fishes will swim with the current. During certain seasons, they will migrate from one location to another. Although whitey is not a mortal fish, they also have this characteristic. Every few years, they will collectively disappear for a period of time. This is the silent period of the fish. Lu Yi was completely dumbfounded. Where did they go? No one knows. In the past, during the fish stillness period, the anglers also looked around to find their traces, but they didn't find any. Therefore, it was speculated that they ran to the deep sea during the fish stillness period. How long will it take for them to come back? Luyi was still counting on them to cultivate. How could they be gone so soon? It's hard to say. Sometimes they come back every few months. Sometimes they come back after a few years or more. I'm busy here. I'll talk to you in detail later. After ending the message with Pu Ku, Luyi was stunned for a long time. He thought that he could cultivate leisurely in this 10,000 elephant sea, advance to the late stage, Yu Yao, and then Rizhao. After all, Whitey's resources in the 10,000 elephant sea were incomparably abundant. He had special fishing methods that could completely satisfy his needs. However, things didn't go as he wished. He suddenly entered the fish stillness period. He couldn't blame Pu Ku for not telling him this in advance. The fish stillness period was completely unpredictable. Even the length of time it would last was different. Before Whitey disappeared en masse, no one knew when the fish stillness period would come. Only when it came could experienced anglers judge from some traces. Those anglers who left in disappointment were undoubtedly experienced anglers. Knowing that the fish stillness period was over, they didn't waste their efforts here. Luyi didn't give up. His original body searched everywhere under the sea. He even went 1,000 miles under the sea. Not to mention Whitey, he didn't even see a ghost. He didn't dare to go any deeper. 1,000 miles was nothing to the constellations in the starry sky. But it was different in the deep sea. Especially in the 10,000 elephant sea. The fuel for his talent tree was greatly consumed. If he couldn't fish now, he wouldn't be able to earn money at will to buy fire tribute treasures in the future. The anglers on Fishing Island had all left. Even the cultivators of the major forces who were in charge of waiting here to buy fish had all left. Luyi was all alone, looking lonely. His original body returned and recalled his clone. He was at a loss. Although the 10,000 elephant sea was vast, Luyi didn't know where to go. After a while, Luyi's expression became determined. No matter what, first of all, he had to make money. He only had 1,000 spirit jades on hand. According to his current cultivation speed, he would use them all up in 2 months. Without enough spirit jades, he wouldn't be able to meet his cultivation needs. If he was in another galaxy, Luyi could still go deep into the starry sky to look for spirit jades to replenish his consumption. However, this was the Wanxiang galaxy. Cultivators came and went from all over the galaxy. Even if there were spiritual jades, they would have been taken away immediately. How could they wait for him? Although he couldn't enter the starry sky to look for spirit jades, there were still many ways to make money on the 10,000 elephant sea. When he was fishing with Pu Ku, he had learned a lot of survival skills from him. So Luyi now had some goals. After collecting his thoughts and fishing equipment, Luyi took out a star map and confirmed the location of a place called Laika Island. Then, he took out the star boat he bought for 30,000 spirit jades and flew in that direction. Chapter 1393. Unless one had a custom-made planetary boat. The ones bought on the Island of Versatility were basically all standard planetary boats. In other words, they were not unique, but there were many identical ones. Luyi's planetary boat was not the cheapest one, but it was definitely not expensive compared to other planetary boats that cost hundreds to hundreds of thousands. In terms of size and performance, it was not as good as the Silverfish. It was only after coming to the 10,000 elephant sea that Luyi realized how valuable the gift from Su Yuqing was. If he sold the silver fish, it would definitely be worth more than 100,000 spirit jades. It was a pity that he was short-sighted and did not realize it in time. Laika Island was a place where the various powers of the 10,000 elephant sea, as well as individual groups, would recruit people. It was also an important way for most constellations to make a living here. The 10,000 elephant sea was filled with opportunities. There were ways to become rich overnight, and there were also ways to slowly accumulate wealth. Once a cultivator arrived at this place, as long as they could endure hardships, they would not have to worry about not being able to earn spiritual jades. Of course, how much they could earn depended on their own abilities. The solitary fish period was over, and he did not know how long it would last. Although there was still a lot of fuel left in the talent tree, it was not enough to support Lu Yi to cultivate in the island of versatility for a long time. Therefore, he had to find a way to earn spiritual jades. At the very least, he had to satisfy his monthly consumption for cultivation. He had heard Puka mention Xiaolei Island many times, but he had been too busy fishing to visit it. Riding the planetary boat, and following the guidance of the star chart, he arrived at Xiaolei Island in less than half a day. Looking from afar, he could see that the island was bustling with activity. Numerous cultivators were entering and exiting the spiritual island like carps crossing the river. Xiaolei Island was a deserted island that was not occupied by any forces. Anyone could enter and leave freely. When he arrived near the spiritual island, Lu Yi kept his planetary boat and looked around in the air for a while before entering the island in a flash. Although this was an ungoverned land, and there was no overall plan, and the number of cultivators entering and exiting was huge, it was not messy. Instead, there was a sense of order. There were rows of jade boards on the whole Xiaolei Island. The jade boards should be the materials used by spiritual tattooists for practice. They were not expensive, and could be found easily. One spiritual jade could buy a large piece. Why would he be interested in getting involved in the dispute between two powers? It would be fine if he won the fight, but if he lost, he might lose his life. Moreover, even if he won the fight, when the employer's power did not need so many guards, the monthly salary would definitely be reduced. Therefore, even though the monthly salary of 800 spiritual jades was attractive, it was not a long-term solution. In the next few days, Lu Yi walked around the recruitment island. However, no matter how he looked, he could not find anything suitable. He could not help but feel helpless. Previously, when he was fishing, a whitey spirit was worth a few thousand spiritual jades. Now that he was here, he was faced with a monthly salary of 1 to 200 spiritual jades. If it was someone else, they might not be able to eat pickled vegetables after being used to delicacies. However, Lu Yi was born in a small place, so he did not feel too disappointed. He did not have high requirements either. It would be good if he could satisfy his daily cultivation needs. It would be best if he could have some surplus. However, his cultivation consumption was much higher than that of a normal constellation cultivator. It would be difficult to satisfy his requirements. Just as Lu Yi was having a headache, the musical note suddenly reacted. He took it out to check. He was delighted and immediately soared into the sky. In midair, he summoned his planetary boat and flew towards the island of versatility. Half a day later, he arrived at the island of versatility. He went straight in and came to the private room that he always visited. Chao Xiang was waiting. When he saw Lu Yi, he stood up and bowed. "Fellow cultivator Li." Lu Yi hurriedly returned the greeting and said, "Is the information accurate?" Chao Xiang smiled faintly. "There's no problem with the source of the information. Our island of versatility specializes in gathering information. As for whether it's accurate or not, no one dares to guarantee it. After all, this is information obtained through investigation. Therefore, fellow cultivator Li needs to verify it for himself." Lu Yi nodded. Chao Xiang's words were reasonable. It would be unreasonable to expect him to guarantee the accuracy of the information at this time. Chao Xiang handed over a jade slip to Lu Yi. "The detailed information is all here. Fellow Taoists will know after checking it. I have to apologize to fellow Taoists for the delay in this matter." With the island of versatility's ability, it would not take too long to gather information. However, the Jade Conch galaxy was too remote and had no contact with the island of versatility. This was why it had been delayed until today. The jade slip contained information about the Jade Conch galaxy. Lu Yi carefully checked it and found that according to the jade slip, if he wanted to return to the Jade Conch galaxy, he would first have to enter a galaxy called Sky Spill, then cross the entire Sky Spill galaxy, and enter a galaxy called Cloud Shine. After that, he would arrive at the Jade Conch galaxy. In other words, if he wanted to return to the Jade Conch galaxy, he would have to cross a full 2 galaxies. The source of the information was a cultivator from the Sky Spill galaxy. He had never been to the Jade Conch galaxy, and had only come into contact with people from the Cloud Shine galaxy. As for how the people from the Cloud Shine galaxy knew about the Jade Conch galaxy, if the two galaxies were neighbors, it was normal for them to have some intersection. Judging from the information in the Jade Slip, the source of the information was somewhat complicated and very reliable. However, as Chao Xiang said, it was difficult to guarantee its accuracy. Lu Yi would have to check it himself. Originally, fellow cultivator would have to pay another 700 jade, but it has been delayed for a long time. How about this? Fellow cultivator will pay another 500 jade. Chao Xiang took the initiative to lower the price. They had previously agreed that he would pay 1,000 jade for information. Lu Yi paid 300 as a deposit, so there were still 700 jade left. Lu Yi did not hold back, and readily handed over the 500 jade. With this, he only had 500 jade left, making him look even poorer. After leaving the island of versatility, Lu Yi pinched his note talisman and sent a message before flying away. A day later, on a reef island in the Thousand Elephant Sea, Lu Yi, who had changed his appearance, sat cross-legged and waited. After a short while, a figure flew over from the distance and saw Lu Yi from afar, revealing a suspicious look. Lu Yi's divine sense surged as he sent a voice transmission. The person flew over and landed in front of Lu Yi, sizing him up before asking in surprise, "Little friend, what kind of secret technique is this?" This old master couldn't see any flaws in it, and thought I had come to the wrong place. Lu Yi casually replied, "Since I'm not strong enough, I have to have some means of disguise. Old Tang, take a look at this." Saying so, he handed over the jade slip he obtained from Chao Xiang. The one who came was naturally Tang Jun. Since the two of them came to the Thousand Elephant Sea, they had not contacted each other. This was also the first time the two of them had met since last time. Tang Jun received the jade slip and checked it, raising his brow after a short while. "Where did this information come from?" "I asked the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce," Lu Yi replied. Tang Jun nodded. "I guessed so." This old master had thought of this method before. But in the end, this old master is Yu Yao, and the target is too obvious. "I thought you would use this method, so I didn't." This old man was undoubtedly a cautious person. Whenever he went out, he would do his best to conceal his identity as much as possible, lest he provoked someone he shouldn't provoke, and bring disaster to his homeland. "Have you heard of Sky Spill Galaxy and Cloud Shine Galaxy?" Lu Yi asked. This old man had a lifespan of 3,000 years, and was a Yu Yao middle-stage cultivator. Lu Yi did not believe that this old man had not gone out when he was young. Perhaps he knew something about these two galaxies. If so, this information was very reliable. End of chapter. Chapter 1394. To Lu Yi's slight disappointment, Tang Jun shook his head and said, "I've never heard of it. As you know, once we leave our domain, the direction radiates in all directions. Although I've been to a few nearby galaxies, I dare not say that I know everything about Jade Conch. Perhaps I know more about Jade Conch domain." Jade Conch Galaxy was named after the Jade Conch domain. It was the well-deserved leader of the galaxy. Although there was no sunlight, there were many moon blossoms. It was much stronger than the old man's Qingli Dao domain. The old man sighed again. "In the end, our galaxy is still out of touch with the mainstream of the universe. I didn't think much of it before, but after coming to the Wanxiang Sea, I realized that we're still frogs in a well." Holding the jade slip in his hand, he looked at Lu Yi and asked, "What do you plan to do?" "Go back," Lu Yi said matter-of-factly. He didn't know the location of Jade Conch Galaxy before, but now that he knew, he had to go back. It wasn't that he missed his hometown. He hadn't been out for long, so he didn't miss it. What he considered was to go back first and figure out the path. In this way, even if the insect path couldn't be formed in the future, if the cultivators of this domain wanted to come to the Wanxiang Sea, they could fly over directly. If this domain wanted to develop and grow, it wouldn't work if they just admired themselves. They had to connect with the mainstream of the universe. The Wanxiang Galaxy was a good place, and also an opportunity. Of course, the journey across 2 galaxies wouldn't be short. Even though Lu Yi had a starboat now, it would definitely take 3 to 5 years. We should go back. Tang Jun nodded. Do you want to go back or should I? Lu Yi was stunned. You don't want to go back? Tang Jun said. Of course. I'm old and don't have many years left to live. Even if I die, I don't want to be buried in a foreign land. I still hope to return to my roots. But first of all, we can't tell if this information is accurate. If it's wrong, we'll just be wasting our time if we go back together. Another possibility is that this information is accurate, and we can return to Jade Conch. We don't have to go back together. One will go and figure out the path, and the other will stay and develop here. When the cultivators of our 2 domains come here in the future, we can more or less take care of them. It had to be said that the old man's consideration was comprehensive. When Lu Yi received the Jade Slip, he only wanted to return to Jade Conch Galaxy. Now that she heard what he said, she indeed felt that the best arrangement was for one to stay and one to leave. I'll go. You stay. Lu Yi immediately made his decision. In the end, the 9 provinces was still a little weak. Moreover, Lu Yi did not want to tell others about the specific location of the 9 provinces, not even Tang Jun. In this old man's mind, he was just a cultivator from the Wuxia continent. Therefore, if one of them had to go back, he would be the best choice. Tang Jun was shrewd with age. How could he not see Lu Ye's misgivings? He nodded and said, Then we'll arrange it that way. But how are you going to enter the Sky Spill Galaxy? Normally, using the insect path was the only way. They couldn't just fly over. The Sky Spill star system had a stable insect path that led directly to the Myriad Phenomenon star system. Otherwise, there wouldn't be cultivators from the Sky Spill star system here. Cultivators from this galaxy could naturally enter and exit the insect passage as they pleased. But if they were not from this galaxy, they would need someone to be their guarantor. This was because there were powerhouses from the Sky Spill star system, guarding the 2 ends of the insect path. If one barged in without a guarantor, they would die in vain. Basically, every galaxy's insect path was guarded by a local powerhouse. One reason was to prevent the local cultivators from being ambushed when they entered the Myriad Phenomenon star system. Another reason was to prevent people from using the insect path to invade the local galaxy. If one day, the Jade Conch Galaxy's insect path stabilized and allowed people to pass through safely, the Jade Conch Galaxy would also need to dispatch powerhouses to guard the entrances and exits of the insect path. All cultivators entering and exiting the insect path would have to be checked before they could pass through. Lu Yi did not have much interaction with people from the Sky Spill star system, nor did he know any cultivators from the Sky Spill star system. Naturally, there was no one to vouch for him. Do you have a way? Lu Yi asked. Tang Jun shook his head. This old man is powerless. Then I'll think of something myself. Looking up at the old man, Lu Yi's eyelids drooped. He said, Old Tang, this journey will take at least a few years. The journey is not safe. Do you have anything you can sponsor? For example, a planetary boat, a treasure of suppressing realms, or something like that. Tang Jun squinted at him. I've already given you my storage ring. What else do you want? Besides, don't you have the red talisman with you? Even if Yi bullies you, so what? You can kill the red talisman of the dwarf clan. Lu Yi said, You can't say that. You said it yourself that you don't have many years left to live. If you burp before I come back, won't your things benefit others? We're from the same galaxy after all. Give me your inheritance, and I'll bring it back to the Green Dawn Dao world. It can be considered as passing it on. Tang Jun snorted. Don't worry, I won't die before you come back. You should at least give me some travel expenses. I don't have much time to search for spiritual jades along the way. I don't have any left. The old man was speechless. This was the first time he heard of travel expenses. However, if Li Taibai could really return to Jade Conch, the Green Dawn Dao world would need him to inform them. He took out a storage ring and handed it to Lu Yi. I don't have any more. Take it or leave it. I don't dare to refuse a gift from an elder. How can I not take it? Lu Yi took the storage ring and looked at it. There were less than 2,000 spiritual jades in it. The old man was quite generous. Lu Yi silently remembered this favor. I'll leave you a jade slip. When you return to Jade Conch, pass it to Wuxia when you go to the Green Dawn Dao world. He will cooperate with you. Tang Jun handed him another jade slip. Wuxia was the third Yu Yao in the Green Dawn Dao world. Lu Yi took it and put it away solemnly. Is there anything else you want to say? Tang Jun looked at him with a serious expression. Don't die on the way. The world was unpredictable. The old man and the young man, who used to be enemies, were now in a foreign place. Now that they were in the same boat, Tang Jun naturally hoped that Lu Ye's journey would go as smoothly as possible. Lu Yi jumped up and laughed. Don't die before I come back. How to enter the Sky Spill star system was a problem. The most appropriate method was naturally to befriend a cultivator from the Sky Spill star system, gain their trust, and have them act as a guarantor. Then they would be able to enter safely. However, these cultivators from the various star systems did not have their origins engraved on their foreheads. So how would Lu Yi know who was from the Sky Spill star system? Asking the Plenitude Commerce Hall for information was one way. However, Lu Yi was reluctant to pay 1,000 spiritual jades for a piece of information. Moreover, even if he did find a Sky Spill cultivator, why would he make friends with him and trust him? He could also try his luck at the worm path that led to Sky Spill. There must be a strong cultivator from Yu Yao guarding there. If he told them his intention honestly, and said that he wanted to borrow the Sky Spill path, it might work. However, it was more likely that he would be rejected. After thinking about it, there was only one way. Zhaolai Island. Lu Yi had stayed at Zhaolai Island for a few days. The recruitment there was not only about the various spiritual islands recruiting guards, but also about other kinds of information, including the transportation of resources. The Plenitude Ocean had frequent transactions. The amount of resources it took in every day was enormous. Some people brought local specialties here to sell, while others bought resources here and sent them back to their home world. The journey was not necessarily peaceful. There were all kinds of people here. When Lu Yi had just arrived at the Plenitude Galaxy, he had even been robbed by a group of people. Therefore, if there was a need to transport resources, someone would be needed to escort them. If there were enough people in their home world, they naturally did not need to hire anyone. If there were not enough, they could only come to Zhaolai Island to find someone. Lu Yi wanted to come here to see if there were any Sky Spill cultivators recruiting people. The probability was not high, but it was better than trying his luck with Yu Yao. He had thought that even if there was hope, it would take a long time. If there was no other way, he could only ask the Plenitude Commerce Hall for information and find a Sky Spill cultivator to make friends with, who knew that in less than half a day after arriving at Zhaolai Island, he would find the recruitment information he needed on a jade board. Just as he had expected, they needed to recruit a few people to escort a batch of resources back to a certain realm in the Sky Spill Galaxy. Then, they would escort another batch of resources back to the Plenitude Ocean. A middle-aged man stood beside the jade board. He had not activated his spirit power, so Lu Yi could not tell his cultivation level. However, he was probably a Star Mansion cultivator. Lu Yi stepped forward, cupped his fists and said, "Brother, please." The middle-aged man sized Lu Yi up and said directly, "One round trip is 1,500 jade pieces. 500 is the deposit, and 1,000 is the balance. If you are satisfied, we can talk. If you are not, please leave." 1,500 jade pieces was not a low price. A round trip would take at least 4 to 5 months. On average, it would be 300 to 400 spirit jades per month. It was higher than the monthly salary of ordinary spiritual islands recruiting guards. After all, the risks in space were high. Lu Yi had seen a lot of recruitment information before. He knew that this price was fair. Moreover, he was not here for spirit jades. He nodded immediately. Sure. Lu Yi discussed some details with the middle-aged man. They exchanged musical notes and agreed to call him when they were about to depart. Then Lu Yi left Zhaolai Island. This mission required a round trip. In other words, even if Lu Yi went to the Sky Spill Galaxy, he would have to come back. This was not consistent with his planned itinerary. Even if he entered the Sky Spill Galaxy, He would not be able to shake off the middle-aged man and act alone. This would easily arouse the middle-aged man's hostility. In the future, it would not be easy for the people of the Jade Conch Galaxy to borrow the Sky Spill Galaxy. Lu Yi planned to use these few months to build a good relationship with the middle-aged man. If he could get the middle-aged man to vouch for him, he would be familiar with Yu Yao, who was guarding the insect path. Then everything else would not be a problem. The middle-aged man did not make Lu Yi wait for too long. He received a message 2 days later. When Lu Yi arrived at the meeting place, he found that there were 2 other people besides the middle-aged man. End of chapter. Chapter 1395. Apart from Lu Yi and the middle-aged man who posted the recruitment notice, there was also an old man and a young man with a crew cut. They exchanged names with each other. Lu Yi naturally reported Li Taibai's name. The middle-aged man was called Zhu Yuan, the old man was called Fan Yinhua, and the young man with a crew cut called himself Jiayu. No one bothered to investigate the authenticity of these names. It was common for cultivators to hide their true names and backgrounds when they traveled outside. After all, this was only a short-term cooperation. Even if it was the employer, Zhu Yuan, he would not be qualified to investigate the details of the people he recruited. Pay for labor, take the money to work. That was the way it was. However, what made Lu Yi slightly puzzled was that among the 4 of them, his cultivation was the lowest. The other 3 were all at the late stage of the constellation realm. Speaking of which, when Zhu Yuan recruited him, he didn't seem to have asked about his cultivation level. He offered $1,500 right off the bat, the price of the jade, and then everyone agreed on it in a few words. Perhaps this was his style of doing things, or perhaps his eyesight was outstanding, and he could tell that Lu Ye's cultivation was not low. No matter what, since he had already joined this small group, everyone would be on the same side before the end of the mission. Everyone is here, let's go. This trip will take about a few months, and I hope that the 3 of you can work together with me to overcome the difficulties. Zhu Yuan said. Lu Yi frowned. Don't you need to go to Fair Island? Although this was the first time he had taken on such a job, he had seen pigs run before. Especially after hanging out with Pu Ke for half a year, he had learned a lot from him about surviving in the Myriad Elephant Sea. Under normal circumstances, Zhu Yuan had recruited 3 helpers like this to escort the supplies back to the Sky Spill Galaxy. Before leaving, he would definitely have to make a trip to Fair Island, because he couldn't guarantee that he would confess. Whether the 3 people he recruited were good people or not, whether they would have any bad intentions halfway through, this required some special screening methods. Of course, this kind of screening method could not specifically distinguish between good and bad cultivators, but it could be used to determine the strength of a cultivator through certain comparisons. Fair Island was named Fair Island, and what it did was also Fair Island's business. There was a treasure created by the joint efforts of the Wanxiang Galaxy and many other galaxies. It was called the Zhongzheng Book. Recruitment notices were posted on Laika Island. Employers who managed to recruit people had the right to take them to the Zhongzheng Book. Just like now, Zhu Yuan could bring the 3 of them to Zhongzheng Island and leave their aura imprints on the Zhongzheng Book. Through the aura imprints, he could check their past missions and see how many times they had been recruited, how many times they had completed, and how many times they had failed. He could even see the evaluations left by their previous employers. If this mission was successfully completed, Zhu Yuan could also do the same. Therefore, when he returned, he would leave a suitable comment based on the performance of the 3 during the mission. Of course, if the mission wasn't completed, or if Zhu Yuan died halfway, then the 3 of them would inevitably have an additional number of mission failures added to their resume. This was also a stain that cultivators who made a living doing this were unable to erase. What was left on the Zhongzheng Book was not a name, so no matter what name was used, as long as there was no change in the aura, the Zhongzheng Book could be used to trace a cultivator's resume in the Wanxiang Sea. It could be said that the existence of the Zhongzheng Book greatly regulated and restrained the temperament of many cultivators. Which cultivator, who was looking for a job on Laika Island, didn't want their resume to be perfect? who would be willing to leave a stain on their resume. It could be said that a good resume would make it easier for cultivators to find a livelihood. On the other hand, if the resume was too difficult, it would be easier for cultivators to find a way to survive. Also, no one would hire them. Even if there were, no one would bear to use them. In the Wansheng Galaxy, there were many gangs that specialized in robbing. Some of them did it because of their nature, hoping to use this method to make a fortune. But there were also many people who couldn't find work on Jiaolei Island. Their records on the Central Official Book were too bad, and no employers were willing to hire them. They had no choice but to resort to robbing. Lu Yi had never left his aura on the Zhongjing book, so his resume was naturally blank. But that might not be the case for Fan Yunhua and Jiayu. Since they were transporting supplies back to the Sky Evolution Galaxy, Zhu Yuan must have a lot of good things on him. Bringing the three of them to the Zhongjing Island to leave their auras and investigate was also a kind of insurance. Lu Yi kindly reminded them to leave a good impression on his first employer. After all, he had to find a way to make friends with them in the following journey. Unexpectedly, Zhu Yuan shook his head and said, "There's no need to go through so much trouble. There are many people on the Zhongjing Island. Just waiting in line will probably take a few days. This batch of material consultation is a simple question. Ask first page female general Gong Ci is not allowed." He smiled and looked meaningfully at the three of them. "Also, I believe in my own judgment." Lu Yi reckoned that Zhu Yuan believed in his own ability more than his judgment. However, he faintly felt that something was not quite right. Whether it was Zhu Yuan's previous solicitation of him, or his current behavior, they all seemed too casual. In any case, if he were in Zhu Yuan's position, and shouldered the responsibility of transporting supplies back to the domain, it was impossible for him to be so careless. Besides, even if they were in a hurry, a few days could not be delayed. This trip would take a few months. However, to people who were hired, their employer was the heavens and the earth. Whatever the employer said, there was no room for argument. Zhu Yuan summoned a planetary ship, and the four of them boarded one after another. After a short while, the planetary ship turned into a stream of light and flew into the distance. The journey was relatively boring. Zhu Yuan sat in the center of the formation to control the ship. He closed a wine jar and did not travel for the voyage. Tu Yunhua would occasionally take a sip. The young man, Jiayu, closed his eyes and rested. Since Lu Yi had nothing to do, he simply continued to deduce his kindred spirit rune. Of course, he did not completely immerse himself in it. Instead, he left a part of his mind to be vigilant. Since he had sensed that something was not quite right, he naturally had to be more vigilant. The planetary ship left the 10,000 Elephant Sea and flew into the depths of the starry sky. Lu Yi turned his head and looked back. Once again, he saw the shocking starry sky spectacle. Looking at it from afar, it seemed even more magnificent. 2 days later, Fan Yunhua suddenly said, "Master, this direction does not lead to the Sky Evolution Galaxy's insect path. Where are we going?" Hearing this, Lu Yi took out his star chart and compared it. He found that the direction was slightly off. Jiayu, who was resting with his eyes closed, also slowly opened his eyes and looked at Zhu Yuan. Zhu Yuan explained, "Naturally, we're going to receive the goods. This batch of goods is not with me for the time being." Lu Yi did not understand, but Fan Yunhua laughed softly. It seems that there's something wrong with this batch of goods. He could not help but smile as he spoke. If there were no problems, they could have been delivered on the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Only problematic goods would leave the 10,000 Elephant Sea and go to the depths of the starry sky. Zhu Yuan did not say anything. He just steered the spirit ship silently. Fan Yunhua also did not say anything. He had just said it casually. How could he continue to ask? Another day later, the planetary ship arrived on a desolate star. This desolate star was unusually harsh. Not to mention mortals, even cultivators with low cultivation bases would not be able to withstand it. Without sufficient knowledge, they could not deepen their knowledge. However, the four of them were constellations after all. They had strong adaptability. Zhu Yuan put away the planetary ship and led the way. Lu Yi and the other two followed closely behind. When they arrived, Lu Yi felt that something was wrong. Even if Zhu Yuan wanted to deliver goods to someone, he did not have to choose such a place. The starry sky was so vast. As long as there was no one nearby, it would be hidden. This place was more suitable for killing and robbing than delivering goods. Of course, it could also be that the other party was being careful. Fan Yunhua and Jia Yu also realized this. They exchanged a glance and became vigilant. It was common for employees to have designs on their employers. However, not all employers were good people. Some notorious fellows liked to use this method to lure people to a secluded place and kill them. They would lose both their lives and their wealth. They spread out their divine senses silently and checked their surroundings. They found nothing unusual. After a while, Zhu Yuan led the three of them to the foot of a desolate mountain. There was a dark cave in front of them. His expression suddenly turned solemn as he stood outside the cave. Behind him, Lu Yi and the other two felt their hair stand on end as their expressions became tense. There was clearly nothing inside the cave, and their divine senses couldn't detect any abnormalities. But no matter who it was, all three of them felt as if they were rabbits that had accidentally stumbled into a tiger's den. It was as if an ancient ferocious beast was crouching inside the cave, ready to erupt at any moment. As they looked around, the dark cave was not just dimly lit. Instead, it was filled with some kind of black substance. Lu Yi slowly raised his hand and grasped the hilt of the mountain pan saber. Beside him, Fan Yunhua and Jia Yu also silently circulated their spiritual energy, ready to attack. Along the way, Lu Yi had always felt that something was not right. At this moment, he finally confirmed one thing. Zhu Yuan was not a good person. Transporting goods back to the Sky Spill star system was just a pretense. His real purpose was to lure the three of them here. As for his purpose, it was unknown. However, there was a high chance that it was a common plot to kill and rob. There was only one thing that Lu Yi could not figure out. An existence that they could not detect, even with their divine senses, had to be stronger than Yu Yao. Moreover, it was not an ordinary Yu Yao. Would such a person be interested in the constellations? Robbing the constellations would not bring much benefit, so this matter did not make any sense. Regardless, the three of them had indeed fallen into Zhu Yuan's trap. No wonder this guy did not make a trip to the central island before setting off. As it turned out, it was completely unnecessary. They had been too careless. In the end, they were still inexperienced. In addition, Lu Yi was anxious to establish a good relationship with Zhu Yuan. After all, if they wanted to borrow the Sky Spill star system, they needed someone to act as a guarantor. However, life was like this. There were always such accidents, and it was impossible to guard against them. Let's go! Fan Yunhua suddenly shouted, activating some kind of secret technique. He transformed into a streak of blood-red light and fled to the left. At the same time, the sound of a sword rang out. Jia Yu merged with his sword and fled to the right. The two of them clearly knew that they were no match for the expert in the cave with their strength. Moreover, they were not familiar with each other in the first place, so there was no need to talk about sincere cooperation. At this moment, one of them fled to the left and the other to the right. No matter who the expert in the cave wanted to chase, the other had a high chance of escaping. Peak address, mobile terminal. Thank you for your collection. Chapter 1396. It had to be said that both Fan Yunhua and Jia Yu had a wealth of combat experience and escape instincts. Almost at the same time, Lu Yi made his move as well. He didn't choose to flee. If possible, he'd rather have Fan Yunhua and Jia Yu cooperate with him. Both of them were late-stage Constellation Realm cultivators. With his help, they might be able to put up a fight against Yu Yao. However, this was clearly unrealistic. He didn't trust the two of them, and they wouldn't trust him either. Moreover, taking the initiative at a time like this was far more advantageous than passively fleeing. The Mount Pan saber left its scabbard and slashed at Zhu Yuan. At that moment, the dense darkness in front of them suddenly twisted. Immediately after, two black shadows shot out like two thick ropes, one from the left and one from the right. Fan Yunhua and Jia Yu fled. Lu Yi attacked with his saber, and a black shadow appeared. Everything happened in an instant. Lu Ye's pupils suddenly shrank to the size of a needle tip, and his mind was greatly shaken at this moment. The Mount Pan saber didn't slow down in the slightest as it ruthlessly slashed down. Zhu Yuan's back was still facing him, his expression solemn. Given his strength, he must have sensed Lu Ye's movements. However, he clearly didn't think much of Lu Yi. He only circulated his spiritual energy to protect himself. However, how could the Mount Pan saber, which had been reinforced with divine edge spirit inscriptions, be blocked by simple protective spiritual energy? The saber fell, and his spiritual energy was destroyed. Zhu Yuan sensed that something was wrong, but it was too late to dodge. In his haste, he could only raise his arm to block. The sharp edge of the saber slashed at his upper arm, splitting his flesh and severing his bones. In that instant of deadlock, Lu Ye's brute force erupted. The saber spun like a crescent moon. Blood splattered everywhere, and a severed arm fell to the ground. Pained cries and screams rang out simultaneously. The one crying out in pain was Zhu Yuan. He hadn't expected to lose an arm in a moment of carelessness. The ones crying out in pain were Fan Yinhua and Jiayu. Lu Yi couldn't see what had happened to them, but he didn't need to see to know that their fates wouldn't be good. He didn't stop at all. After cutting off one of Zhu Yuan's arms, a sky full of blade shadows enveloped him. Zhu Yuanqing's cultivation was at the late stage of the star constellation realm. His strength was extraordinary. If they were to fight one-on-one, Lu Yi would have to expend a lot of effort to take him down. But in the end, he paid the price for his carelessness and underestimation. When Lu Ye's berserk saber momentum was unleashed, he could only parry, and had no power to fight back. In just 3 breaths of time, Lu Ye's black saber pierced through Zhu Yuan's chest, directly piercing through his heart. If it was a cultivator below the constellation realm, they would definitely die from such injuries. However, Zhu Yuan had refined the essence of his body to the level of perfect bone marrow essence. Although the injury was serious, it was not fatal for the time being. He stabilized his body, not daring to move rashly. He stared at Lu Yi with eyes full of shock and disbelief. He never thought that a late-stage constellation realm cultivator, like him, would be able to grasp the gate of life of a mid-stage constellation realm cultivator, like Lu Yi. He could clearly feel the spiritual power on Lu Ye's mountain saber. If he made the slightest move, his heart would explode into pieces. If it was a simple stab wound, he could still use his power to heal it. But if his heart exploded, he would definitely die. On the left and right, Fan Yinhua and Jiayu's screams were endless, as if they were enduring extreme torture. The 2 black shadows that had emerged from the cave slowly withdrew, as if a giant was retracting its arms. As they withdrew, the screams grew closer and closer. Lu Yi saw the 2 being dragged into the cave by the black shadows from the corner of his eyes. The deep darkness surged, and the screams disappeared. Along with them, the 2 people's vitality disappeared. At this moment, Zhu Yuan's expression was complicated. He was still wondering how he had been subdued by Lu Yi. Lu Ye's expression was just as complicated. He had previously thought that the one hidden in the cave was Yu Yao, but when she attacked and her spiritual power leaked out, he realized that his judgment was wrong. The one hidden in the cave wasn't Yu Yao. It was Rizhao. No matter how hard he racked his brain, he couldn't figure out why it was Rizhao. To Rizhao, constellation realm cultivators were like ants on the ground. Why had Zhu Yuan spent so much effort to lure the 3 of them to Rizhao? Was it purely for fun? That wasn't necessarily the case. The myriad constellation galaxy was filled with constellation realm cultivators. If this guy really wanted to have fun, he could have just gone out for a stroll. It would have been better than causing Zhu Yuan so much trouble. Moreover, the number of Rizhao in the myriad constellation galaxy was limited. Most of them were local powerhouses. Even if Rizhao came as a guest, he wouldn't stay for too long. Oh! An aged voice rang out from the cave, sounding rather surprised. It was undoubtedly because of Lu Ye's reaction and performance earlier. Even if Zhu Yuan had been careless in the beginning, it was still an astonishing matter for a mid-constellation realm cultivator to take him down in a short span of 3 breaths. Lu Yi could clearly feel a powerful divine sense observing him. This made him very uncomfortable. It was as if a venomous snake's tongue was constantly licking him. Under this kind of licking, any of his subtle movements or changes in his expression couldn't escape the other party's inspection. You have a good temperament and are very decisive in your actions. The old voice came from the cave again, as if appreciating him. Then the voice turned playful. So, what do you plan to do next? Lu Yi lowered his eyes and said indifferently, I'll take him away. When we reach a safe place, I'll let him go. He originally thought that if Yu Yao was in the cave, he would find an opportunity to use the red talisman to kill her. During the early stage of the constellation realm, he had killed Qin Yuandai. Now that he was a mid-stage constellation realm cultivator, and had been nourishing in his body for a longer time, the red talisman should be even more powerful. Killing Yu Yao shouldn't be a problem, provided that the other party wasn't too strong. But the other party was Rizhao. This plan wouldn't work. Lu Yi estimated that if he wanted to unleash the full power of the red talisman and reach Rizhao's level, he would have to at least advance to Yu Yao's level. Take the hostage and then talk about the terms. Not a bad idea. The old voice praised lightly. As soon as he finished speaking, a black ray of light shot out from the cave and directly hit the back of Zhu Yuan's head. Zhu Yuan's eyes suddenly dimmed, and his body fell limply to the ground. The mountain pan saber came out of his body, and the clothes around his chest were instantly dyed red with blood. Then what about now? The voice from the cave became even more playful. Lu Yi lowered his head and looked at Zhu Yuan's corpse, speechless. The hostage was already killed. What was there to talk about? Although he didn't know who was in the cave, judging from the other party's behavior, it was obvious that he wasn't a good person. Zhu Yuan was definitely one of his people. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought the three of them here. However, this old man didn't hesitate to kill his own people. It was clear that he was evil and cruel. Moreover, he was as strong as Rizhao. Even if Zhu Yuan was still alive, Lu Yi estimated that he wouldn't be able to use him as a hostage. Escape wasn't realistic. Fan Yinhua and Jia Yu were examples. With Rizhao watching them from such a distance, there was no way to escape. Lu Yi only hated himself for not being careful enough. If he had been more careful, he would have left the Imperial equipment outside in advance. Perhaps he would have had a chance to escape. But without knowing Zhu Yuan's destination, even if he had such a thought, where should he leave the Imperial equipment? Lu Yi waved the mountain pan saber in his hand and looked at the dark cave. He circulated his spiritual energy and brazenly charged in. Since he was going to die without a doubt, he might as well die fighting. It was better than waiting for death. That was a good idea. However, as soon as he rushed into the cave, Lu Yi knew that he had thought too much. The thick darkness around him was like a solid substance. When he fell into it, it was as if he had stepped into a swamp. His body stagnated, and even his spiritual energy was suppressed. He couldn't use his divine sense. Not to mention killing the enemy. He couldn't even see what the enemy looked like or where they were hiding. The old voice sounded again. Your courage is commendable. Unfortunately, you overestimated yourself. How about this? Kneel down and kowtow 3 times, and this king will spare your life. In the darkness, Lu Yi gritted his teeth and didn't say a word. He swung his saber continuously, but he couldn't cut anything. The huge gap in strength made people feel especially powerless. As if this action angered the other party, the old voice coldly snorted. Stubborn. This king wants you to kneel, so you have to kneel. A huge hot pressure suddenly fell from the sky. Lu Yi's body, which could still barely move, suddenly stiffened. It was as if he was suddenly carrying a star on his back. His body couldn't help but tremble. As the pressure increased, his expression became difficult. His eyes widened in anger, and his bones creaked. His face was full of blood, almost dripping blood. The old man was obviously slowly pushing his limits. Lu Yi only felt that his leg bones were about to break. If he forced himself to continue, the only result would be that his leg bones would be broken. However, he still forced himself to hold on. On the Wushuang continent, the deity Ocean from the Chaotian sect in Dingzhou was held hostage by Zhao Tianmu from the Qingli Dao world. If he could face death with equanimity, there was no reason that he couldn't. The cultivators of the 9 states might have all kinds of problems, but many people had a common trait, and that was, they were not afraid of death. This was because those who were afraid of death were almost all dead. Under the immense pressure, Lu Yi was gradually approaching his limit. It was at this moment that he suddenly exerted force in his legs and shot forward like an arrow from a bow. The expected scene of his leg bones breaking did not happen, because almost at the moment he actively exerted force, the huge pressure on his body suddenly disappeared without a trace. Even the black fog around him was no longer so thick and condensed. In a full attack, he poured all his spiritual power into a saber and slashed it forward. The bright saber light pierced through the darkness and immediately disappeared. Lu Yi felt that his mountain saber was blocked by something. He wanted to pull out his saber, but he couldn't. He could only kick forward. This kick hit something, but Lu Yi didn't know what it was. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, there was laughter in the cave. The laughter was loud and deafening, sounding extremely carefree. Chapter 1397. In the dark cave, loud laughter rang out, and Lu Yi felt his eardrums tremble. The darkness around him receded like the tide amidst the laughter. Gradually, a dim light seeped in, allowing Lu Yi's vision to slowly recover. He finally saw what had blocked his mountain pan saber. It was 2 fingers. They were so light that he couldn't pull his saber away. He also saw clearly what he had kicked. It was the old man's face. At this moment, when the darkness dissipated, he was still in the posture of slashing down with his blade and kicking with his foot. His body was stiff. He did not know what the old man was laughing about. The only thing he knew was that if the old man wanted to kill him, he would have died 100 times over. The big foot blocked his view, so he could not see the old man's full face. However, the blurry outline gave him a strange sense of familiarity. A slight repulsive force came from the blade. Lu Yi took the opportunity to withdraw his blade and took 2 steps back. A slightly aged face with a beard and hair appeared in his field of vision. The old man was sitting upright there and sizing him up with a grin on his face. It was like a lion examining its prey, and it carried an indescribable feeling. Lu Yi's expression became surprised because he recognized the old man. He did not really know the old man, but he had seen him from afar. Nearly 3 months ago, when he and Pu Ku were fishing on Fishing Island, a strong master had caused havoc in the Wanxiang Sea. He had killed a Wanxiang Galaxy's Rizhao on the spot. When he escaped, he passed by Fishing Island. Lu Yi had caught a glimpse of the man's face from afar. No wonder he felt a sense of familiarity. The old man in front of him was the one who had escaped from the Wanxiang Sea. After the incident, the Wanxiang Sea quickly calmed down, and there was no movement after that. Although Lu Yi knew that the Wanxiang Galaxy would not let the matter go so easily, a Rizhao-level matter was not something a constellation could investigate. He could only guess that the killer had escaped. Otherwise, the Wanxiang Galaxy would have spread the news. He did not expect the old man to be hiding here. What was certain was that the experts of the Wanxiang Galaxy were searching for this person's whereabouts. The entire galaxy's airspace had probably been turned upside down. As for how this old man had managed to avoid being tracked down, that was obviously his own ability. At the moment, all the powerhouses in the Myriad Phenomenon Galaxy probably thought that the old man had already escaped from the galaxy. Therefore, it would be a clever move for him to stay there. But what Lu Yi didn't understand was, this person was hiding well. So why did he ask Zhu Yuan to bring him here? At this time, he slowly figured out some things. The 4 of them had come together, and including Zhu Yuan, 3 of them had been killed. On the contrary, Lu Yi, the one with the lowest cultivation, had not died. If someone were to say that this old man did not have ulterior motives towards him, Lu Yi would not believe it no matter what. But why was it him? Just because of a quick glance on the fishing island? At that time, he didn't notice that the other party was paying attention to him, but the other party's cultivation was high, so it was normal for the other party to notice him when he was observing him. He probably didn't want his life. If he wanted to kill him, he didn't have to go through so much trouble. He also didn't have to risk exposing himself by staying here. It was even more impossible for it to be because Lu Yi saw his appearance. This old man didn't hide his head and tail, so there should be a lot of people who saw his appearance. But why? In an instant, Lu Yi thought about a lot of things, but he still couldn't figure it out. On the contrary, the old man's words made him instantly feel a little angry. 9 regions cultivators, your bones are still so hard. The old man looked at him with a smile, like an elder sizing up a junior, and there was even a hint of admiration in his eyes. Lu Yi tried hard to control his emotions, not revealing the slightest flaw, and only pretended to be puzzled. What is senior talking about? This junior doesn't understand. You're not from 9 regions? The old man's expression remained unchanged, but even with his eyesight, he couldn't see any unnatural changes in Lu Ye's expression. Lu Yi slowly shook his head. I'm from the Wuxia continent. Even Tang Jun didn't know that he was from 9 regions. So how could Ri, who had only seen him once, know? But Lu Yi knew in his heart that since the other party dared to ask this, he must have seen something. But what flaws could he have that the other party could see? This wasn't a small matter. Back then, Yang Qing had specially warned him not to mention 9 regions when he traveled the starry sky in the future. When she brought him to the reincarnation tree, she even used the name of Jiutian to act. This was because the powerhouses of the previous 9 regions era had provoked too many enemies. Now, even if 10,000 years had passed, hatred was something that was difficult to eliminate once the roots were planted. Especially those powerhouses who had once attacked 9 regions, they were definitely extremely sensitive to the words 9 regions. So Lu Yi wanted to understand how the old man in front of him could determine that he was from 9 regions. Just as he was thinking about how to probe without leaving a trace, the old man smiled slightly. If you're not from 9 regions, why do you have the aura of the Tianji plate on you? Lu Ye's pupil shrank slightly, and he finally figured out where the problem was. So it was the Tianji plate. Every cultivator of 9 regions, even if they were rogue cultivators who didn't belong to any sect, had a battlefield imprint on them. This was because only with a battlefield imprint could one enter the Spirit Stream battlefield and the Cloud River battlefield to search for merits and battle achievements, and to communicate with others easily. For the cultivators of 9 regions, a battlefield imprint was a necessity, and the battlefield imprint was given by Xiaojiu. Xiaojiu was the combination of the spirit of the Tianji plate and the origin of 9 regions. The cultivators of 9 regions who had a battlefield imprint would naturally have the aura of the Tianji plate. According to the information Lu Yi had obtained, when the 9 regions era was besieged by many powerful enemies, the Tianji plate hadn't been born yet. The powerhouses of 9 regions realized that the situation was irreversible, so they worked together to create the Tianji plate. Borrowing the power of the Tianji plate, they moved 9 regions away from their original position and escaped disaster. For 10,000 years, they had been staying in a remote corner of the Jade Conch galaxy, not connecting with the starry sky. In other words, the enemies who attacked 9 regions probably didn't know about the existence of the Tianji plate. Only the native cultivators of 9 regions knew about this divine object. Thinking of this, Lu Ye's heart moved. He looked at the old man and said, "Senior you." The old man's expression became serious. I am Ma Bin of the Tian Continent's Human Emperor sect. Tian Continent Human Emperor sect. When these words that he had heard before shook Lu Ye's eardrums, all of his doubts suddenly became clear. But he had never expected that one day he would be able to meet the powerhouses of the previous 9 regions era. Because according to the information Xiaojiu had provided and the battle situation shown to him, all the cultivators of the previous 9 regions era, who were qualified to participate in the battle, had rushed into the starry sky to fight. In other words, as long as their cultivation reached the constellation level, they would have killed their way into the battlefield. Lu Yi didn't know the final result of that battle, and Xiaojiu didn't know either, because when the final battle began, the power of the Tianji plate was activated and 9 regions was moved away. But the situation was obviously not optimistic. With this region as a retreat, the cultivators of the previous 9 regions era could still retreat to recuperate and recover. Without this region as a retreat, it was a situation of fighting to the death. It was not impossible for them to be completely wiped out. Luyi had always thought that the powerhouses of the previous 9 regions era had all died in battle. Even if they hadn't died in battle, they should have died of old age after so many years. Because according to the current cultivation system, the lifespan of a constellation cultivator was 2,000 years, Yu 4,000 years, and Ri 8,000 years. Those with long lifespans might be able to live for a few more years, but it was still very difficult for them to live for 10,000 years. Of course, this number was only in theory. In reality, as cultivators grew and survived, they would often fight with others. Injuries were a common occurrence. Even if they recovered, it would affect their lifespan. That was why Tang Jun was approaching the end of his lifespan. For Ma Bin to be able to live until now, it was unknown what means he had used and what price he had paid. Of course, it was also possible that the other party was lying, but Luyi felt that it was completely unnecessary. Ma Bin was such a powerful cultivator. If he really wanted to inquire about any information from him, he had many means. There was no need to lie that he was from the previous 9 regions. The most important point was that Ma Bin mentioned the Tianji plate. This should be a secret that only the cultivators of the previous 9 regions knew. In the current 9 regions era, only Luyi knew about it. To be safe, Luyi still asked, "What's the Tianji plate?" Ma Bin chuckled. "Don't pretend. I participated in the creation of the Tianji plate in the past. I'm very familiar with its aura. It's just that I haven't felt it for 10,000 years. When I felt it a few days ago, I thought I was hallucinating." There was no need to probe anymore. Luyi took a deep breath and straightened his face. He put away the Pan Shan saber and bowed to the elder in front of him. Luyi of the Jade Blood sect of the War Province greets Senior. "You're from the War Province? Good. There used to be a righteous sect in the War Province. They were all tough bones like you. There's a righteous sect in the War Province now, but there's no righteous sect," Luyi said. "Maybe it's a legacy from the past. After 10,000 years, many things have changed." Ma Bin sighed and gestured with his hand. "Sit." Luyi sat down in front of him obediently. He thought for a while and said, "Senior, did you notice me that day?" Naturally, he was asking about the incident on Fishing Island 3 months ago. Ma Bin nodded. "I noticed the aura of the Tianji plate on you. That's why I kept an eye on you. I had someone investigate you and thought of a way to lure you here." It seemed that Zhu Yuan was indeed Ma Bin's man. He was also acting under Ma Bin's orders. Luyi frowned and said, "In that case, Zhu Yuan isn't from the Sky Spill star system. This trip to deliver supplies is completely false." Ma Bin said, "That's right. However, Zhu Yuan is very meticulous. He was afraid that you would be suspicious, so he specially recruited 2 more people. That so-called information about how one can reach Jade Conch by borrowing the path from the Sky Spill galaxy and entering Yunshang. It's fake. He got someone to spread it. However, it's true that one can enter Yunshang by borrowing the path from the Sky Spill galaxy. The cultivators of Yunshang galaxy also used this method to enter Wanxiang galaxy. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.